So I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is 7 o'clock. This is the first meeting of the Tri-Board meeting. It is July 8th. It is 7 o'clock, and we are at the Adult Activity Center. Would you all please stand, address the flag over here, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Fantastic. Thank you all for being here. I think we're going to start by making it an official meeting and have each one of the chairs open their meeting, and after they've opened their meeting, to introduce the members of their board or their committee, and have that, whoever it is, just raise their hand. Okay? All right, so I'll start with you.
Sure.
Select Board.
It's 7:01 p.m. and I'm calling the Select Board to order. My name is Caesar and I'm the chair of the Select Board. See if it's fine, everyone. So right there's Glenn McLeod, who's a member of the board. We have Brian Leighton, who's a member of the board as well. Renee Hadke is here, and Amanda, unfortunately, was not able to make it tonight.
Okay, very good. And how about schools?
Anthony's still in Brady, and we have our new superintendent, Dr. Fortuna, Mandy Gilman, Laura Brzozowski, Emily Young, and Georgia.
Excellent. And how about finance?
Finance Committee, I'm Chris Menard. So far we have Anna Lockwood, Jean Russell, and Tanya Dahl.
Okay.
I think Jay's coming in now as well.
And Jay's. And
Finance Committee needs
in
watches.
second. And I like to start on time if we can. And the town meeting, we can't start on time because people are still lined up in the hall. Okay. And we also have our finance director, Ezekiel Ayala, is here, and on this committee as well. Okay? Great, George. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is go over the ground rules. I think before we do that, though, I probably should say that my name is Tim Murphy, and a couple of you, including Jen, had asked me if I would be here to sort of facilitate things, and I said I would, and I will do that as long as nobody seriously objects. It might make sense to have somebody neutral, hoping to keep everybody talking at all times. So is there anybody who would rather I not do it, and other than Dave Rogers, who's sitting behind us? Oh.
Highest for God.
Thank you very much, Dave.
That's what should happen. You should be the moderator.
All right, so that's his vote of confidence. All right. Anybody else? Okay, very good. Okay, so you all got ground rules in an email at some point in time. In my note, I call them guiding principles because I don't think we have to have rules. People like us, volunteers, well-educated people, committed people. But anybody want to discuss it? I think Select Board voted these, correct? So they've approved it. What about schools or finance? Does anybody want to talk about the guiding principles, otherwise known as the ground rules? No? No questions, comments, concerns? Okay. The only one that seems to be particularly important is, I think, somewhere near the end where it says, hard stop at 10 o'clock. Good.
Does it say PM?
Yeah. And I know my granddaughter, who's 7, said, you're going to be till 10 o'clock, you won't get any sleep. Well, kind of the way it goes. Okay. So at this point in time, I'm going to take things a little bit out of order. It's on somebody's agenda. It says that the chief was going to make, as you can see, a proposal for his fourth shift ideas. And rather than keep one of our dedicated employees, sorry, Ezekiel, we're going to keep you. But we're going to ask the chief to give his presentation and then let him go. I think he said he's covering some shift or something. So.
Set the order earlier tomorrow.
Okay.
Again, part of the discussion we had, we'll cover a shift. I'm covering a shift tomorrow. So someone doesn't have to get forced in.
Okay. Are you getting good volume on his voice over there?
Yeah, I got a different mic.
You can. Okay.
Actually, I have your voice very easily.
Okay. Go right ahead. Go right ahead, Chief.
Good evening. Thank you for hearing me. Some of you have heard this last year when I presented some of this at the Finance Committee meeting. Just to kind of go back, a little history on the fire department. For years, we were strictly on call from the 80s up to the early 2000s, we had a couple of full-time people. 2000 to 2017, we had 3 full-time people supplemented by some per diem staff, basically to call people working at their hourly rate, filling in the daytime. Nighttime, we were on call. Well, as part of that, the call volume's been going up. It was getting harder and harder to staff, to cover calls. So in conjunction with the town manager at the time, we developed a 5-year plan to come up with 24/7 staffing in the station, to at least put a basic duty crew in the building, and to develop an ALS service. So in 2017, we added 1 career position. Starting in 2018, the 5-year plan was implemented, which at the time we hired 1 person per year for 5 years. It jumped around a little bit. We hired 2 in 1 year and skipped a year. But that was also, as part of that, the new people were trained as paramedics. And in 2023, we went online as an advanced life support service, providing that service to the town rather than having to reach other communities, other services outside of the community to do that. So since 2023, we've been doing that. Since 2024, we've been covering the calls 100% of the time. That just, next slide, sorry. Just a quick slide of how our runs have gone up over the last 14 years. We've seen definitely the last few years, the medicals have jumped up. They've stayed even the same last 2 years. We're on track this year to easily stay in the same level, which is about 1,200 ambulance calls a year. It accounts for 70% of our calls. But again, we are a fire department. We provide that service too. The advantage to having firefighter EMTs and paramedics, we can do both. Whatever the call comes in, we can deal with it. We don't have to have 2 separate services to handle that. And while the fire calls have stayed somewhat steady, we have seen an uptick in more serious calls like building fires, things like that in the last couple of years. Next slide.
Can I
yeah.
ask her, have you noticed any change, any impact from closing of the show again?
What we have noticed is some impact, not directly to us, because only about 15% of our calls went there, but what we've seen is an uptick in mutual aid, backing up like Townsend or towards Shirley, because those communities have gone further away. We've also seen our wait times have gone up on an average of 8 to 10 minutes at Leominster Hospital. And what we've seen is because that wait time ripples out, that everybody else's ambulances are tied up there, so we're doing more mutual aid in Fitchburg and Leominster.
So that mutual aid isn't factored in?
It's factored in the total number of calls.
Okay.
And that. I don't have a number on there for mutual aid, but I do track that. We've seen an increase in the mutual aid since the Neshoba closed for ambulance.
So just to be clear, the blue line and the green line and the red line do not include multiple aids, just the black graph.
The black and the fire and the red and the blue include the mutual aid runs under those categories, fire or EMS.
Okay.
They are included in that. The black is the total everything, including
Everything.
Inspections and all that. So, and we've seen an uptick coincidentally on the fire end of it too. It's been an unusual year. Everybody's been a lot busier. Next slide. So currently, our career staff covers 6 days a week, Monday through Saturday, 3 shifts of 3. They work 24 hours on, so basically they work 24 hours on, 48 hours off for a 48-hour week. That rotates on an average of a 6-week cycle. Sundays are covered by our call and per diem personnel. Basically, again, call people, getting paid their hourly rate to be in the stations. We have 3 of them there, one of which has to be a paramedic, and that's where some of our challenges come in. We're finding it more and more difficult to cover the Sundays, especially with paramedic. We currently have 7 on-call paramedics, one of which is out long-term IOD with his regular job, so we're really down to 6. I'll mention all of these people work full-time other fire departments, and so they're dealing with similar issues, overtime, forced in shifts at their own jobs, so they make time for us when they can. But what we've run into over the last few years is it's been increasingly required, again, to maintain a minimum level of staffing and maintain the paramedics, to have the career staff forced in to cover the Sunday shifts. And normally Sunday shifts go to the per diems first, they're offered to the career. If none of the per diems take it, if nobody takes it, then to at least maintain a minimum, one of them gets forced in to cover it. By contract, that's double time for them on Sundays. In 24, FY 24, that was an additional 23,000 in overtime. Next slide.
And just to make sure I understand, so people that are ready to work 48 hours, they may get pushed to work a whole other
Another either 10 or 14 hours.
14 hour on a Sunday.
Yep,
Okay.
correct. And that's in addition to covering overtime for open shifts and things like that during the week.
Right.
So, but it says 48 hours off. It's not often actually 48 hours off because
Right.
you have to cover other stuff too. So again, in calendar 24, 71% of the forced in shifts were on Sundays. Like I said, it's increasing wear and tear on the staff. Like I said, the time off isn't really the time off. They're being forced in more and more to cover it. As of right now, this year, we're on track to probably equal or surpass what we were in 2024. When I looked at them today, as of this weekend, the same time last year, we were for the same number of forced in shifts, we were in September, and it's July. So the problem's not getting better. Back in 2020, the plan was to go to a 4-shift rotation. That didn't happen. So we continued on with the 3-shift rotation with the people that we have. And it's worked out well until we've hit the point that we need to maintain that paramedic. And that's part of where the challenge is. And we're having trouble we've got the per diems. They cover some of the career shifts if they don't want the overtime. But even again, they're getting drawn into their own jobs. They're busier there. We've got 3 new people coming on, but they're brand new green. Hopefully that's going to stop the bleeding a little bit. Next slide. Again, this is just a quick graph. I don't have 25 on there because obviously the data's not there, but you can see how it's gone up and over time. Next slide. So the solution, the proposal is to go to a 4-shift cycle, which changes their work week from 48 hours a week to 42 hours a week. So it adds a fourth shift of 4 firefighters, or fourth shift of 3 firefighters, I'm sorry. That takes the full-time coverage to 7 days a week. So the career force is the primary, 7 days a week, with the per diem and the call force supplementing them. We're not relying on 1 day a week, that we're still relying on the per diem force to cover it. The plan would be we currently budget 96 hours a week of per diem. We take that, possibly add a little bit to it, cover 8 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week with a per diem. That would actually effectively provide us 4 people through the heaviest part of the busiest part of the day. What does 4 people do for us? It allows us to staff both ambulances in most cases. Right now, first ambulance goes out, we have 3 people on duty, goes with 2. Third person chases in the car, assists on the scene. If another call comes in, hopefully we have people that came back in coverage. But we're only guaranteed 1 person there. And if it's a serious call and they have to go on the call with them, well, hoping people come back. And that we recall people, but it's roll of dice. Sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. Having 2 people, we'd have much more of a guarantee to staff a second ambulance, or if a fire call comes in, at least you have 2 people going out the door on the engine. Not ideal, but it's better than 1. One guy is just going to drive the truck there and park it and go, I hope some more people show up. Next slide. So the difference, the 48-hour week versus the 42. The 48-hour week, as I said before, it's a 6-day cycle that repeats itself over 6 weeks. They cover Monday through Saturday. They work 48 hours each week, basically 2 24-hour shifts. So when I say 1 day on, we call 1 day is 24 hours, 2 days off, so 48 hours. The 42-hour week goes to an 8-day cycle over 8 weeks. It covers 7 days a week. It averages out to 42 hours a week, and I'll explain that a little bit more in the next couple of slides. This just shows how 1 shift, on the 48-hour week, there's 3 shifts, but to keep the slide clean, it just shows the progression of one shift across the week. So again, Sunday is always per diem. The full-timers go across Monday through Saturday. Next slide. The 42-hour week basically goes from one shift on, 3 shifts off, across an 8-week cycle. Where they say it's an average is because out of the 8 weeks, there's 2 weeks that physically, technically, you work 24 hours. The other weeks, you work 48. When you take that all together and average that out, it works out to 42 hours a week. So, but you're covering 7 days a week, because now instead of 3 shifts there, there's 4. Next slide. So what's the benefit to us? It benefits the town. It gives us better coverage. We're not constantly trying to cover the per diem shifts. Worried about that. You've got dedicated career firefighters there all the time. The per diem staff is going to supplement that, and there's still the call force that comes back and backs them up. Because again, 3 people or 4 covers your ambulance, maybe your second ambulance. Something larger, serious motor vehicle accident, fire, bigger incidents, you need all those other people coming back in anyway. It certainly doesn't eliminate them, but it takes, it takes out that we're getting the truck out the door that much faster right away. In the old days when we were on call at night, sometimes it could be 10 minutes before the truck got out the door, and then needed to get on scene. Because it depended on where people were coming from their homes. I started back in the call days, I wish it was like that, but the call volume, back then we were doing 300 calls a year. We do almost 1,700 calls a year now. It's a strictly call operation can't support that. It can supplement the career force and covering it. It distributes the overtime a lot more evenly. Is there still going to be forced in shifts and overtime? Absolutely. But it's not going to be hammered on a weekend all the time. We're still going to cover stuff, and you have 3 more people to cover some of the shifts too. And that. It certainly helps recruitment and retention. As I said, you say you have 24 on, 48 off. But anytime in that 48, you may be working 10, 20, 30 hours of overtime in there. You may have callbacks. Like I say, Sunday, you may be going back to fill that. And with the paramedics, there's only 6 of them to cover that, because there's only 9 full-timers altogether. The officers can cover some shifts, but if we need a medic, it's got to be one of the paramedics. As I'll show momentarily, the 42-hour week is the standard around Massachusetts and around New England for a work schedule. So when it comes to hiring people, especially hiring from outside, we need to be competitive. The pay scale needs to be competitive. The work schedule needs to be competitive. When we did our last hire a couple of years ago, we had 2 paramedics, experienced paramedics from outside. Neither one took the job. They wouldn't take the schedule. They couldn't take the pay cut. So we've been fortunate. We've trained our own people at a substantial cost. I want to hang on to those people because they're really good people. They come from town. They know town. And they're great people. But I want to hang on to them. Next slide. And again, just to emphasize, this isn't an odd ask that we're looking for something unusual. Out of the fire departments in the state that have career coverage, 191 of them do the 42-hour week. 6 do 48.
Is that 42-hour week the same schedule of 4 shifts that you showed us? Or is it managed differently?
Some of it is managed differently. Some of it is daytime coverage only, which is what we used to be. It worked out it was daytime coverage only. So the 42-hour week, those are 24/7 departments. We've had 2 departments in this area that used to be 48s. They both transitioned to 42s, Rutland and Winchendon, within the last year or so, for similar issues to what we're having. So, next slide. Just a quick breakdown of the breakdown of the department of how it would look with the shift. Anything in red is a full-time position, black is on call, and the yellow would be the new shift. So you basically, instead of having 3 shifts of 3, you'd have 4 shifts of 3. Plus we still have the call force. So the estimated costs, and again, this is educated guess, is $464,369.26. That figures the cost of 3 new firefighter paramedics at step 2, which is about where they would start. Expected increases in overtime and holiday pay. The estimated, that includes estimated time off, callbacks, and holiday for the new hires, and anticipated increases in the overtime rate for the career staff, changing the schedule. And it would be creating 1 new officer for the new shift, which would be a lieutenant paramedic, because that would come from one of the existing firefighters, career firefighters now. So a little more breakdown on the cost. So, in general, 3 new firefighter paramedics, $209,000 and some change. The 4th shift officer, that's the difference from a current top step firefighter to step 1 lieutenant paramedic. The estimated overtime increase, which again would be estimated overtime for the new hires plus increases because the overtime rate would most likely change for the existing staff. Same with the holiday increase. Uniform by contract for each new hire is $1,100 per year, so it would be the increase for that. The OPEB cost is based on probably worst case scenario, family plan, top end insurance. So again, some of these numbers could change. Like we said, we may not hire, we might not get 3 firefighter paramedics out of the gate. We might get basics starting at a lower rate. We'd have to train them, which is a different challenge, but we've done it. We did it with 4 of the 6 that we have now. So it just takes a little bit more time. So again, implementation, amongst even with the financing, this is going to require negotiations with the firefighters union. They're well aware of that. They'll be going into negotiations later in the fall. So there's a lot of things to discuss there that can change things in a whole bunch of different directions. And I couldn't even begin to target any of that stuff. Yes?
Yes, that's just my question. So would we expect, if you're going from 48 hours to 42 hours, that obviously those folks, we would want to cut their pay? Is that sort of what you're, I just want to make sure I'm clear on what that.
My personal feeling,
yeah, exactly. I just,
to recruitment and retention, you,
Yeah.
you maintain the same base salary,
Right,
which
they
would
work less
increase
hours.
the hourly rate.
yeah,
You're not seeing an increase in your salary line. Where you see the increase is the overtime,
Okay.
because your overtime rate is going to go up.
okay,
This is what Winchendon did.
okay.
So that, again, I don't have to say in negotiations, but that's my
Obviously.
personal opinion, is that, because that takes their average, this is baseline, we're floating around here, it puts them about there somewhere. We certainly wouldn't be the top end in the area, but we would not be the bottom end. And again, it's getting harder and harder to hire from within, from the call department, so we're gonna be looking outside more and more. We may need to, that's something we need to look at, we need to be competitive.
And you said negotiations are happening before we would,
They would,
before this,
it's up to the union and the town manager,
Yeah.
but that would be going on sometime
In
in
the fall,
next
most likely.
several months, some point. There's a lot to discuss, so,
thank you very much.
sure. Last slide? I think that's the last slide.
Doesn't want to change.
So again, gives us a little more efficient fire and EMS coverage. All goes well, it would give us 4 firefighters on duty, 3 career, 1 per diem, 7 days a week through the busiest part of the day, up until about midnight. It would provide us base staffing of 2 paramedics on duty, pretty much all the time. It would certainly help recruitment and retention for staff, and it would definitely go a ways to decrease burnout. And that it would give people a little bit more recharge time between a busy shift. And anybody that's got a scanner that listens to us, some days you have a slow day. Some days you may do 10, 12 calls. And keep in mind, a call for an ambulance is close to an hour minimum, probably more like 2 hours. So add that through the entire day, and it can be a long day. And that you definitely want to have some recharge time. And that's the last slide. Any other questions?
What do you think is the percentage of multi-aid calls that you get
Mul-
a year? So out of the 1,700,
That you mean like we get simultaneous?
yeah,
Calls?
for out-of-town calls,
Usually,
Mutual aid. Hang on, give me a second. I'll pull up a couple numbers here.
it could be something you send to us.
Yeah, I have the number. Luckily, the wonders of technology, I have access to that. I can tell you where we were at last year.
Yeah, that's good.
We did a total of 135 mutual aid calls last year. 10 runs with the engine, 10 runs with the ladder, 8 with the brush truck, 64 EMS, 4 ALS intercepts, which means we're meeting up with somebody else's ambulance that doesn't have paramedics but needs a paramedic, which is what we used to do with everybody else. We're not seeing a ton of that. And then we had 10 other miscellaneous ones with a lot of it was dive team activations, technical rescue team activations. We have guys on for the district, and 29 times to cover other towns.
Right. And how many calls do we have that we needed assistance last year?
That I don't have right in front of me. I could pull it up. I know we're averaging between 15 and 20 simultaneous calls a month. It means like while we're out on one call, another call comes in. That sometimes we're taking the call back, like they're taking a call from the hospital. Sometimes we've got guys in the station who can take the second call. Sometimes we're juggling a lot to make it. Sometimes we rely on mutual aid, just like some of the other towns do.
Sure.
We found, especially on EMS, there's not enough to go around in the area.
So I lost track of time, but when did Neshoba close?
Neshoba closed September 1st of last
So
year.
it wasn't a full year.
No.
So I would expect that
If you
impact
looked at our
would really be felt this year.
If you looked at our EMS call, mutual aid EMS calls, they were 3 to 4 average a month until August. Then they were 9, 8, 8, 8, 9. And again, not always to some of those towns, but it's overflow because of the effect on Leominster that it's backing up the cities too. And they're busier themselves. Yes?
Thank you for the presentation. I did have a question about the switching over to a 7-day-a-week schedule. You had listed an increase in overtime. Can you explain that in more detail? Just like if you're covering the 7 days, where is the additional
But
overtime?
you'll have the time off for the 3 new people. They will eventually get vacation, personal time, so they've got time, you would be covering that. I'm assuming they'd be coming back for calls. Like when we get something, we recall people, they'll be coming back in. They'll be covering other people's shifts because the existing full-timers have time and that. So I estimate a certain amount for each one of them, roughly on an average amount for what everybody's overtime rate is. And like we said, if you keep the same base salary and go to the 42, that changes the hourly rate, which means the overtime rate increases. And part of that number was to increase that estimated coverage based off the existing overtime. Right now, we usually run slightly over on overtime, but we're under in other spots, so it balances out. And that, I'm trying to keep it that way. So, like I said, we rely a lot on overtime, both to cover shifts and for recall, for people to come in, cover the station when we have a call.
Anyone else? Okay, Renee, keep going.
Your estimated cost, I assume you work with town manager to come up and, or does he?
Izzy helped me out with all the OPEB costs. Most of the other costs, they're based on, the numbers are based on the current rates that they would have going into FY26, because that's the last year of the contract. So that's what all those numbers,
So those
numbers are based on their current salaries.
Right, so what happens in collective bargaining would have an impact on that.
You want to add anything, Zeke?
Yeah, for the OPEB costs, we attributed the additional firefighters just the future costs for the liabilities of the town. This is a simple formula.
So you feel good about that?
Anything else? Thank you, Chief, that was excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think it gives us a good overview for everybody, depending upon where you are, what committee you're on, you know, what's going on in town, we all look at it. Okay, so the next thing that I would like to address, which I think everybody did on their agenda, each of the committees, is a discussion on consolidation and efficiency. It also says timelines, but I think timeline might be a little more than we can handle that. To see where we can go with you know, what are the consolidations and efficiencies that people are talking about? Go ahead, Jen, why don't you tell me something?
I do. So this, in helping the chair put this agenda together, one of the things that I noticed going through this last cycle is that there were conversations had at various groups, but independent of one another, about things like, should the town and school explore a joint facilities department? Should the town and school explore human resources? Should the town look to establish a trash enterprise? Things of that nature. So what I was contemplating under this agenda item is that we could have some initial conversations about what things do we think that we realistically want to explore? What things do we just want to say, not for now, not for today, and then we can set them aside and we can say as a group that we have set these aside. And then if there's something that has legs, what is the reasonable time frame for that? And so the timeline, Mr. Moderator, was really about, I'm going to use facilities department as an example. Superintendent and I talked about this earlier today. There's been conversations about different elements of facilities that could be combined. If people think that that is something that has legs that we should discuss, we think that this is the worthwhile use of your time, maybe not tonight, but at some point in this process, number one. And number two, something like that has collective bargaining implications, that has major restructuring, and I think something like that, the realistic timeline for implementation of a combined facilities department certainly is an FY26, most likely is an FY27, and good chance maybe if all the stars align for FY28 or beyond. So it's to really just kind of plant a flag that yes, this is something so we can say that to the public, this is something we're exploring. It's not going to be part of this budget.
That kind of lays it out. Thoughts on what Jen has just talked about? This is something I have lived here for 40 years, something like that. You know, we're always talking about how to consolidate things, save some money, be more efficient. So I throw it out to everyone.
I have a comment. I've been talking about this for a while, and operationally speaking, it's not. I don't see it as much as savings, but it's preventing waste and preventing, degradation of our buildings and facilities. At the end, I think that what it has happened over the past, ever since we instilled a facilities department, the school, ever since John Londa left, we've been, we haven't really found our next John Londa. And, when we keep moving and trying, and Chris, he's been here now for 3.5 years, I think, the most, or 2.5, I think it's 2.5. And I think, by having a combined department, the first thing you're going to have is more redundancy. And, ability to operate better. Instead of having one lead person in each department, you have two. Ability to collaborate, how many fields do we need to mow in town? Do we need to buy now double the equipment, or do we need to have 3 instead of 4? Because we need 1 extra for redundancy, but we don't need to count. So I think there's a lot of operational benefits where we're going to be getting more for the buck that we're spending by combining those 2 departments. And I also see it, and I'm going to mention. I know a facility related to the schools that has happened in the past few years. It was the units on the rooftop of the high school. They were out because we didn't have anyone in charge. We didn't know that, and it wasn't, we are missing that. And Chris Ruth is doing a great job catching up to what has happened in town. So I think it's just that, bringing those 2 things, those 2 very small departments together, it would just align the towns to just get the most for a buck and stop wasting money on, things falling between the cracks type of thing. So that's my thoughts.
Go ahead. You don't have to raise your hand, I don't think. You start to become a problem. Okay.
So when we did the budget task force, we looked at consolidating the departments for the schools and the towns for a couple of different things. We looked at consolidation for some of the business stuff, administrative stuff. We looked at IT, and we looked at facilities. I think that, and I don't want to speak for the board, but my experience on the school board has shown that the IT thing, I think, for reasons that are more related to personalities and individuals than structures, that was something that wasn't really successful. The concern that I would have about consolidating the facilities is I don't think that it would result in fewer people, and I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think it would
Yeah.
either.
Yeah. But the other thing is the way in which the schools use their facilities people is different than the way the town uses them. And my concern is that they may come in conflict where we're deploying certain people to do this thing, but the schools need something else. And like the example that Dr. Burnham gave was opening the school during a snowstorm. And so if we have a snowstorm, the town is going to have a priority in terms of getting the roads clear. But if the roads are clear and the grounds are not, then the school will still have the problem. And what will happen is there's like a ripple effect. If we have the roads clear but the grounds are not, and people can't get in, then we have a delay or a cancellation, and then that would spread cost out to both the town and the school. We really, for reasons related to regulations and statutes for governing the number of days for school, we really do not want to keep the school open beyond that last day. It just gets much, much more expensive. It's more expensive to pay people, it's more expensive to adjust the schedules, and it's also more expensive to run the buildings. And so if you have 5 extra days in February that get tacked on at the end, and those 5 days could have been handled by having a separate set of people, then I don't know if it's going to be an efficiency. I don't know what it would look like. That's the concern I want to put out there and say, like, in thinking this through, we don't know what the answer is. Is it more or less money? But how do we deal with the fact that the two groups need to have different roles at the same time during essentially the thing that makes the schools most problematic? Like mowing the fields, honest rightly, no one really cares. You mow them. As long as you do it on a consistent basis, you'll be fine. But it's really the snow days and those kind of situations that drive everybody to school crazy.
I'll just get ahead.
Part of my concern consolidating facilities, a lot of it has to do with like what Tony said when it comes to what happens during a snowstorm and we need to have emergency egresses cleared and who is in charge of deciding whether or not that's important, because maybe to our superintendent that is the height of importance that our children can get out in an emergency. But if the town manager disagrees and decides to deploy, or the DPW director decides to deploy facilities people, or I'm not sure how it would work, decides to deploy them elsewhere, or they're too tired and they've been working up all night plowing the roads, now we don't have emergency egresses cleared, and there's no clear chain of this needs to get done, and there should not be an argument over that. We have a superintendent we appointed who's in charge of the safety of students. I'm also concerned if they were town employees as opposed to school employees. Now, is that coming out of our budget, but we don't have control over the people we're hiring who are working in environments with students and coming in and out of the school? If there are issues with that, and the state law also recognizes that in that the school committee is in charge of our facilities, and that's pretty clearly laid out. I know there are places where towns have handed that over, where school committees have handed that over. It's hard to see if it was successful or not. There are also places where schools have tried to take it back because of issues. And I don't see it as saving a lot of money. We're doing our fields right now. We've been mowing, there are redundancies, but there's also a lot of covering for each other. The two facilities departments work together. If, for example, we're doing the fields outside CCP, because the DPW couldn't add that in. So we've been doing the fields outside and maintaining the grounds at TCP. In this past year and the year before, there were times that mowers broke and we've covered for each other. So it's a redundancy, but it's not a waste of money. They're covering for each other. So I'm not keen on combining facilities for the reasons outlined.
And can I piggyback on that? Do you want to go first?
No.
Okay.
Sorry, you have good peripheral vision.
The cooperation. There you go. Right.
I agree with a lot with what you were saying and what the gentleman at the end was saying as well. I have never heard of a school being charged with like the public school grounds in a town or a city. I've always been very familiar with the city being charged with the entire public ground. So I want to learn more about that. My concern also is when you are bringing departments together and you're bringing two department heads together, there's going to be two people in charge. And that never, I've not seen that work. There has to be somebody who's completely accountable for what the rules are, who's going to be doing what. It has to be very strategically placed out. I'm not saying it can't be done, but I think it's going to be a very difficult feat to combine two departments with two heads and two people in charge. There's going to have to be, I think, at least somebody calling the shots on that.
I would not recommend a model that is two people in charge.
Yeah.
You would have one person in charge.
Yeah. So how do you even decide?
That would be the savings.
And that is the savings,
I
as well
just-
as efficiencies.
I
And
wanna-
if I may just finish, I would say do a thought experiment. If we're going to just take grounds, why not have 4 grounds departments? Why stop at 2? Let's have 4. We'll have one for parks. We'll have one for the conservation. We'll have one for the rest of the town and one for schools. And it's already the most confusing thing in town where like something breaks in a playground and they're like, oh, we called the town. No, the town's not responsible for that. It might be the school and it might be parks, because some of them are in the parks and some are in the schools.
You call your wife. This happened like 2 weeks ago. I emailed your wife. I was like, no one knows the answer. What's the answer?
So I do think that for
You can
grounds,
sit down. You're part of the meeting. Well, we'll talk about it later, okay? David, not a public.
I do think for grounds it makes a lot of sense to have one. I also think for IT it makes sense to have one. I think if you're going to start on this, I think it makes a lot of sense to do this, and it makes no sense to me to have 2 redundant departments in a town as small as
I could add on, because I don't disagree if you feel that when it's been separated that there's a potential loss of control, but I heard a comment made, the one's a town employee, one's a school employee, everybody's a town employee.
No.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
yes.
everyone's a town employee. So,
Hold on.
We hire.
no, I know, I get that part, but the money for schools and parks and all that is coming, it's town money, it's all town employees. I get that we have different heads and different boards that hire and make decisions on things, but if one person is tasked with the job of coordinating, they should be able to coordinate snowstorms appropriately to make sure the school opens and the roads open. They should be able to coordinate that something gets mowed, and if they get a breakdown or you got somebody out sick, how are they gonna cover that? Every business does that. There's no reason government can't do that. So
Hold on, Jen's gonna come out and receive.
I got it. Just because I did not say something that I should have said at the outset, but when Tanya's comment, it made me think of it immediately. I want to share with you, as we're having these discussions, what staff has shared with me, okay? And I think it's important, because they're going to view these videos as well. There is a sentiment that as we're asking them to weigh in on this, let's just take the 2 Chris's, for example, that we are asking them to help weigh in and advise us on the elimination of their position. And so at some point in any restructuring, that could be an outcome, and I just really feel it's important to flag that and be mindful about how we talk about that, because staff very much felt some sort of way about even seeing this on an agenda. Are you asking us to eliminate ourselves?
And I think we've all dealt with that in industry. I mean, we've had discussions in my industry where the discussion was your job's gonna go away, right? But if we're facing budget crises, that may be something that we need to deal with.
But we don't necessarily have to take the two best people who are running those things and eliminate their job. One would be in charge, the other person would do something that might be along the lines of some sort of supervision or whatever. And unlikely you have to touch their pay or anything like that. And then other people there might have to be other eliminations, but it's just about managing the situation.
Renee, we didn't let Renee go. She deferred to Don.
I cut Renee off, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
But so much has happened since then.
That was
I'm gonna say, I
moderator,
think,
my God.
okay, so. Passing notes?
Oh, sorry, that's the statute on the duty to maintain school property.
One thing I wasn't gonna say, but just came up, I mean, it could be just putting a new person in charge of I mean, there's all types of reorganization. Doesn't mean anyone loses their position or change, whatever, but I don't think adding a person is gonna save money, but that isn't necessarily the point. The efficiency, I think the other thing we talked about on Budget Task Force was even looking at service contracts that we use for, I'll give you a basic example, my irrigation system. My neighbors and I use the same company because we get a deal. We use the same lawn service company because we get a deal, as opposed to if we use we each use a different person. So those types of efficiencies, I think, are low-hanging fruit that probably hasn't been looked at. And then I think I'd like to know the other areas that if we could just tick off what functions, services, whatever, are possible or worth looking at, like Jen said, worth looking at to consolidate, and ones that are like, that's never gonna work. We're done. I'm not gonna discuss it. Let's focus on the things that are viable. Because I think all of these things, except maybe some service contracts, it's a long time before that could be implemented, but you gotta start.
Can I? So I think one of the things I'm hearing, which is just interesting, because I think we started it off by saying, are we looking for I don't think any of this is a cost savings, right? So if the goal is to get better services, right? Is that what are we saying we want? Are we thinking that by consolidating services, we might get better services? Is that sort of?
In my opinion, based on what I
understand. I just want to.
I think we will get better services by performing better in facilities. We are going to get cheaper redundancies, and the equipment is a good way to think of it, right? We don't need to think of, both departments don't need to have a double of something we can have with it. So I think we're gonna just get a lot more for our money, and on that side. And, and I'll differentiate one thing, be concerned of the snow emergencies. I think on average we have 3 or 5 a year.
It can really affect the school year.
I didn't disagree, I'm just.
Past June 30th, it's gonna cost this town.
Okay, I'm just giving a perspective of time.
Mm-hmm.
It is 3 to 5 a year, and, and it's disruptive, and not saying it cannot be dealt with it. I'm just giving a number. It is 3 to 5 a year. DPW and facilities are 2 different departments.
Yeah.
Clearing the roads is DPW. Facilities, they do work during the town. Chris Ruth and his crew, they do work on snow removal, but it's more of the entrance of the buildings and so forth. They're not plowing. So this is 2 different things. And some of the concerns that I'm hearing is a lot of scenarios of what ifs on the wrong side. But let's imagine what ifs on the positive side, where, these expensive systems that we have are not getting burned out, because now we have, more than one set of eyes on those systems. We have more than one person who can operate them. These are beautiful things, and they're good for the schools, they're good for the town, and, imagine having a colleague. I see, people get worried about who's the boss, I'm never worried about who's the boss. I'm always gonna bring, you know, my 2 cents, good or not. It's like you just, and when you get a good group of people working together, they work collaborative. And that's what happens. So there's so much what ifs, possibilities that are better for the town as a whole. It just, everyone, and we can go down that long line as well.
Can
I just-
Wait a minute. Can we focus it for a minute?
Yeah.
Just on the idea of cost versus better services?
Yeah, I think
Okay, so let's start there so that people can kind of say where they're at. Because maybe some people are thinking, let's save the money, we need to save the money, you know, to have enough. And some people are thinking about, boy, we could get more efficient services. So let's focus just for the minute on that conversation. Where are you at on cost savings versus better services?
I think that I'm actually concerned about the idea of better service, and I know I've been here a relatively short time. However,
How long?
7 days.
7 days.
However, what I've seen in the move from TC Passios to the work that has needed to happen at Turkey Hill, and the way that our facilities department is handling and working around obstacles in a very nimble way. Like, they'll go out into the workshop and make something work for air conditioning immediately. And I am hesitant to lose that nimbleness as issues arrive in the school building, to have a dedicated facilities and maintenance staff to handle that. Now, I'm not saying we can't explore this and talk about equipment and purchasing equipment and things like that, but there is a certain nimbleness of service delivery that we have that allows us to keep our buildings safe and operational for our children.
Okay.
So
So your
can I-
question is, will there be better service?
Yes.
Would there be better?
Right, some different people, but go ahead.
Yeah,
Amy.
so part of my,
And
the
then I wanna
second part of what I was
involve
gonna say is, and we can move, I wanna know the people in the room who've worked in other towns. I feel very strongly that I would like to know that this has worked other places. I think that's just an important step. And I know Jen, you've worked in other towns. I know, you know, the superintendent, it doesn't have to be you guys, but just, you know, I think that would be a comfort or an interest to me of how other towns have made consolidation work before we were to dive into the deep end of something.
Yeah, actually, there are, and I know of them.
So
but-
where are people at? Are they looking for cost savings? Are they looking for better services? Go ahead, Anthony.
So I think that trying to figure out what better services looks like is sort of impossible because it's just a question of getting the right people in the right place. Like every single person I've talked to since I joined school committee was like, John Lando was really a great guy. He got everything done. And like, I never met him. I don't know what he was like. Apparently he was a colonel in the military, so he like got stuff done. But I don't think that we can use a systems approach to create better services. It's just getting good people. I just want to see more money. I don't, you know, like, I think, maybe I'm wrong, I think that the town does a pretty good job at a lot of things with the people that we have. I just want to see more money. I think that, like, the places where we have weaknesses and the places where we have strengths, I don't know that systems are going to make that better services possible from this perspective. It's kind of like trying to dial a phone number with a broom handle. We're too far away from the people and the problems to understand what it is that makes them function well. We're just not capable of doing that.
Okay, where are people at? Cost savings versus,
How about cost savings without sacrificing services?
I can share my opinion,
Yeah.
is that I think that on paper, in an operational budget, this doesn't likely save 1 penny in a specific operational budget. It may actually cost a little bit more. I think when you take that out and you look at it from a bigger lens of making sure that we're maintaining our buildings on better schedules, making sure we're responding to things quicker, that we have a comprehensive cohesive capital plan, I think that is where you're going to see the overall savings. So it's not going to be in the operating budget, it's going to be a little more intangible, and we might not ever be able to measure and capture it. That's where I am on that, and I was in the community of Oxford when this happened.
And how did it go?
It certainly, I think that the biggest obstacle was the collective bargaining agreement with the janitorial staff that was in place.
Yeah.
But then ultimately, once that was handled, it worked fine.
So it was one joint facilities for the town school.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree with you on all of those things. I don't know that we're gonna see any type of monetary relief, but we're going to see efficiency relief in strategically putting operations and administration so that all the departments are running on the same type of operational systems, how things are input. I just also, before you go, I want to share, because I think, this was passed to me, and I just want to put it in the open, because if someone sees that, I don't want it to be like secret hiding. And I appreciate that because this did, I know, this did bring up a very good point about combining municipal departments, how it can affect, everybody. It can affect but does not eliminate the duties of the town under the Mass General Laws, Chapter 7168. The town, it says here under this law, is ultimately responsible even for the schools, even though it's separate. So I think that what you're trying to say, and correct me if I'm reading it wrong, is that the separation of schools and town is not really a separation. The town is going to have to take care of the schools no matter what. So we might as well work together and put our operational systems together to make it more efficient. It might not be more cost effective, but it will definitely be more efficient and easier for people to run programs within the town.
So I'm not even sure it will be more efficient. Our needs are very different. Like our needs are very different than the needs of the town when it comes to facilities. Our schedule is different, and our needs. I think Dr. Fortuna can probably talk more about how our needs are different because she knows the needs of the students, but we serve a different population. And the school committee, everyone here, we're all committed to figuring out the budget and everything, but our main task as school committee members is the students, and our focus is on the needs of the students. So I think Dr. Fortuna can probably talk more about.
Yeah, talk about how it's different. I mean, it's all buildings, it's all removal, it's all fixing, it's all facilities. I know we have this heart and this passion of the students at the middle of it, and we have the heart and passion of the residents at the other end. We have to put things in place to protect our students. I'm all for that. But maybe you can explain, Doctor, how it's so different than running the town.
I think it's the million little things that happen that aren't seen. Like, for example, moving the washer and dryer for our ACE students and being able to revamp the ventilation for the dryer so that our ACE students, as they move to their new home, are able to practice those types of skills. I think the snow day scenario, even though it is only 3 to 5 days, it could end up actually being more, and I think this is where the redundancy is good, how the shifts work. The town is really up all night clearing the roads, and our guys are coming in early morning and getting the schools ready and being able to make that call. I think being able to create small things like a ramp to go into an elevator, though why we put an elevator in that wasn't handicap accessible to begin with, I don't know. But there's creating a ramp.
You wouldn't have that. Like,
I don't know. I'm talking of, like I said, 7 days. I don't know. However, I do know that the condition that the primary school is in, being a 25-year-old building, and you would never know that that building was 25 years old. And granted, TC, Passios is older, but you do see the lack of deferred maintenance in that, and you do see the deferred maintenance in that facility. So I'm actually worried about what would happen to our school buildings as we work to keep them up to a standard for our students.
Yeah, just as a comment, the TCP building was actually a school building until it was turned into the town on that shape and form. So
it looks the same to me. Like one department can do all of those things without affecting children. Your last point though is valid. Is very valid, which kind of turns me a little bit, but not that much.
I think some of it might be if we need a ramp for the wheelchair,
time, and, you know, Dr. Fortuna reaches out, or principal reaches out and says, we need this done ASAP, because we have a student coming in tomorrow who's going to need this, and if they don't get it tomorrow, it's going to affect their education in a way that might result in a very costly lawsuit for the town.
And that goes to efficiency and operations.
But if maintenance decides, this is not something we can accomplish right now, if we have a shared department, what do we do? What's our recourse?
But see, I don't, as a school committee member, I'm obviously gonna try to stick up for my fellow committee members. But in this case, I look at this as a management thing. We're not, once it's together, you're not pulling players out of the school. You just got somebody managing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. And when you need a ramp right away, it's like, we need a ramp right away. Okay, we'll go make the ramp. You know, like, it's not,
So
I
we've
don't.
done- I'm sorry.
Yeah, but it's just, in my opinion, if the right person's running the department and managing the efficiency properly, you should see no change in service. That's, in fact, you might see an improvement in service if you have the right person running
So we've done this.
and not knowing those people that run it now.
Okay, all right, you gotta let some other people talk. You gotta let some other people go, it's okay. Because I haven't heard from, and Brian, I knew I wanted to ask you.
So one concern that I have is that who would be the facilities boss?
Yeah.
Right? Is it the superintendent? Is it the town manager? Do they have two bosses? We've also seen this in the past with the IT director. We had IT shared before the superintendent and town manager. The IT services were shared, and the schools were not happy with the way it was going. Yet the former town manager was happy with it, and it just created this bad situation. And eventually the schools broke off, and then even the town broke off from that IT director. Some things that I thought could be beneficial too, even just sharing mowers, trucks, wear and tear on trucks, helping out repairs, oil changes, washing vehicles, potentially shared vehicles, but maybe mowing at different times. But I think the hours are not going to change. You're still going to need those hours for work around the town and the schools. But my biggest concern was who's in charge, the superintendent or the town manager. And if it's the town manager, then when the superintendent needs something done, is she really going to get that phone call answered?
I think everything we do here fundamentally means that Jen and Jody need to work closely together. And this town is in a bad shape if Jen and Jody can't work close together.
And just going over to talk to Jody just now, what I said is, what I am hearing is that there is a certain level of openness to us exploring this on our own. There are certainly some challenges that we need to discuss, whether or not they are insurmountable or not, but there's at least enough that there's enough interest to explore this. I don't want to get totally stuck, though, on this, and so if there's other things that have legs for exploration,
Well, I didn't want to
other than
get to that,
facilities,
because
yeah.
we've only done one
Exactly.
sort of department, if you will. You know, it's a big deal, and it's the easy one that everybody always starts with.
Yeah.
And snow always is a huge one. Where are we on IT, or what other departments do people think where there could be some efficiency?
Can I throw a department out there?
Yeah, go ahead.
I know that we do this differently, but I think that there is a potential cost savings for the town to have a lawyer on staff.
A lawyer?
A lawyer.
Oh, I'm always in favor of that.
Yeah.
The two lawyers.
Well, what I'm saying is, so we've used two different firms. We have outsourced this in an effort to maximize efficiency and have the free market give us the best results. Unfortunately, we are simply too small for any firm to give a shit, to be quite frank. And we will get no response to basic questions for weeks on end. And then we get responses, and they're not great responses. It is a function of our size. You know, the market only works if you have enough money to change the market's desires, and we don't. And so we spend, I think last year our budget was $85,000 guaranteed for legal costs. I don't know what the town's is, but there are people that do municipal law that can do both of these things. And if they were beholden to the town as their only client, they would be more efficient and they would provide a better service. And I know this is contrary to all of the popular thinking about lawyers and about making things, you know, using the free market. But the free market is not working for us. It is not doing well for us. It has not done well for us for 5 years, and it is time to change. And if we are spending 85, I can't imagine the town is spending less than that. You can get a lawyer for that and have them work at the town.
Could you list some of the, I'm just curious, what some of the things that the school pays a lawyer for that you think this lawyer on staff
So
do? I'm just,
I mean, one of the things that the primary thing that they do is they handle investigations and disputes with the union. So
Okay.
investigations of students and investigations of employees, and then disputes with the union. Those are probably, I don't know, Dr. Fortune, what do you, like 70% of what they do?
Yeah, and then I'm going to have them more involved in our contract negotiations as well.
I like that idea a lot.
I would agree. Just being on the select board for a short period of time too, I recognize one of the lawyers' names, Mark Terry, who also does schools. So
Yes, he
that
does.
would be an easy consolidation, I think.
In my last district, we relied on, it was town council, we relied on town council, and it worked out great. It was wonderful to have that ability, and they were able to help the schools with what we needed help with.
And one lawyer can do this?
No.
'Cause I know there was a thought about
No.
No.
engineering as well.
I think one lawyer could do that.
Absolutely not.
Well, you,
I'm just telling you, like, I deal with people all over the state of New Hampshire, and they have one lawyer that does help.
So-
One law firm?
So I will
One
say that when it comes, so first of all, the town has a absolutely unbelievable contract in that we pay a flat rate to our town council, and we are not charged billable hours. Okay, so.
That's not unusual.
So, well, it is in municipal law. So the issue with one lawyer is that well, you're saying 70% of the caseload is employment. I have dog bites, licenses for easements on property. I have sale of land. I have zoning board of appeals. It really becomes quite nuanced and quite particular, and I wouldn't hire one lawyer. I wouldn't hire that law firm if they only had one lawyer. Because I need the expertise, the specific expertise.
but do you have, so right now, is your contract with a firm that does
We have
all
a
these things?
contract, we have two separate contracts. We have one contract with a firm who provides everything but labor at that flat rate. And then we have Mark Terry, who is a fabulous labor attorney, who does represent schools, who provides an hourly rate for a labor council.
so I think the contract for the town lawyer was $120 last year?
That sounds about right, yep.
Yeah, so what if I mean, is there a way to maybe add the school and renegotiate where they're saving?
They typically will not.
All right, but let's
But
not
that's-
figure out
but-
what can't
right.
happen.
But they
That's
typically-
going back to the snows and what time we open the school versus when we go. So we got an idea that, you know, we talked about facilities, maybe something, you know, maybe the lawyer can work the town and the school together. That's a good suggestion, something to explore. Where are other places where people think that there might be some efficiencies, savings? You know, are there other?
I'm intrigued by trash enterprise, what does that mean?
Trash.
Can I ask one?
Oh, sorry.
Just on the lawyer.
Yeah.
Can we flip the lawyer thing? What if we went regionally into a regional buying power kind of thing?
That
Where
would-
like 6 towns got together.
I'm just gonna say this, whatever we do is better than what we're doing now on the school side.
So the schools are dissatisfied.
So literally, you know, randomly throwing darts would be better. You just don't get.
I don't want to say off the cuff, but.
Do you know roughly how much?
I'm not, so I just want to be clear, I am not in these meetings going to answer questions about specific numbers that aren't in front of us, okay? So I'm happy to circle back on those things, so, but I just want to be clear that I'm not
That's okay,
getting
we've identified something where there's some exploration could be done, and maybe some benefits could complement, whether there's savings or just benefit.
Even if we could just use the employment lawyer
Sure.
for contract negotiations.
So I think Mr. Bernard did something.
But I had also HR director, I don't know if that's worth exploring.
Yep.
Also cleaning services, I know the town just recently talked about contracting services. I don't know if the school would be willing to contract services for cleaning units.
But let's take it one at a time. talk about HR, which is
No,
also.
the trash. I'm the trash person.
Huh?
You mentioned trash. I mentioned trash, but she went, trash.
Take you off the next meeting.
I don't do anything.
You're in trouble for me. I passed the notes, to be
Oh,
fair.
you're passed.
Yeah, don't blame it on it.
All right, I'm losing control of the meeting.
Tim, can you add
Let's-
space on there?
Huh?
Collaboration of space, uses of space between town and school.
Uses of space. Okay. So you got HR, you got cleaning services, uses of space in town, would you say?
IT.
You're taking notes there.
Mm-hmm.
I can't read mine. We're talking about the lawyering, we'll call it. Okay, so that's another thing, lawyering, yeah.
IT?
IT should always be on.
Or no on
the list.
IT.
Okay. Go ahead, what else are the places we should be exploring?
I just heard that there was a hard no on
No,
IT.
we
It's
did
its
it,
own.
we did it a few years ago, it absolutely did not work, it was detrimental to the school system. I'm only speaking for myself, I don't know about the other ones, but I'm a hard.
Different players, different game.
I think we gotta go.
I feel strongly about. I think what happens on the municipal side and the school side with software applications and usage are two very different things, and I'm not sure that there's being married to an IT person. I'm not sure that there's one person that could do everything that we would need to have happen in an efficient way. So that one for me would actually be a hard no.
There's different types of IT services, right? There's like hardware, desktop.
Yeah.
And
I
there's
think
different aspects.
That's a good differentiator because there's hardware, there's systems, there's users, there's the student. And then there is software packages, which is something that, I'm curious, Jan, no, I have asked for those numbers. And the software packages can vary tremendously in price between different companies. So, and the power to buy, you negotiate how many licenses you're buying. So the bigger the department you have, the better it would be.
Do you guys
I think
use Power School?
Power School?
Yep.
We don't.
No, but we all use Zoom.
I think we see it across the town, like the biggest expenses are people. We're not gonna cut people in IT. It's gonna be maybe save on some servers or some programs, but there's most programs, the schools in town still have the same programs, same software.
For some people, it would be hard no on it, but maybe some other people think it's still worth exploring. And maybe it's something that's lower on our list as far as where we're going to start and what we're going to tackle. Maybe because we didn't have great experience. And that may have had to do with the personnel that we had trying to manage both versus it being impossible. So
But even-
what else is there?
Even unifying on like the remote meeting platform, because we've had issues with, Zoom accounts and getting access, and, I mean, I'm like really, like basic stuff here.
So right now we are sharing that, it's a school secretary who's being paid to administer the meetings.
But
It's coming
sometimes
out of our-
we've had trouble getting,
Yeah, there's issues
Counts,
that we
there's-
need,
there's-
that now
yeah,
that
there's-
in place. We've already talked about scheduling up a meeting to work through some of that, but yes, it is
and
somewhat
maybe
being shared.
Zoom's
But
not,
yeah,
maybe
that is-
Teams,
that's
I don't
Zoom-
know.
Zoom is something we have
We
been
should-
collaborating on since COVID.
But maybe we should get rid of Zoom and go to Teams or something.
So I believe we
Dun, dun,
I have
dun.
to learn a new software? Come on!
I'm just kidding.
We've
We're already
been
paying for
moving
it.
to Google Classroom because it's free and it's not free.
So there's still a lot of discussion in that arena, because IT is very broad.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
more than
there
just-
could be little pockets of,
So it's sort of buying power. I think some of this is we're talking about buying power, not actually IT. I mean, it's IT buying power, right? But maybe we should be focused on the idea that maybe buying power is something we should be,
That's something we should be teaming up.
we should be easily doing, or if we're not, we should be thinking about
printers.
printers.
Oh, yeah.
So is that its own category, buying power? We got
Supplies.
Supplies,
cleaning
right?
services,
Yes.
and use of space.
Right, to talk about it in that sense instead of like IT staffing.
We're certain, yes,
I'm still interested in trash over here. What is that?
I told you, I said.
What does that mean?
I'll talk to the
Talk about trash.
Yeah, I'm just curious,
So to
like,
me-
I don't know anything about.
To me, we just thought, you know, Chief Sullivan gave a 470K upper. Ironically, we paid 470K per year in recycling. In
No.
recycling.
So if we just start recycling,
Well, the budget was
we
470.
could just pay for the
Firemen?
So if we came up with an enterprise fund, where everyone in town pays for recycling and trash through an enterprise fund, we can shift that money to pay for a fourth shift.
Done.
So wait, so explain.
That sounds
You gotta
great.
explain how.
So, yeah, I'm so rookie at this, so can you explain to me what an enterprise
So
fund?
you would buy toters.
What?
Like, for example, you would buy 2 toters for the year,
Okay,
one for trash, one for recycling.
Mhm.
It would cost whatever it costs the town divided by however many toters you have, fully self-funded at this point. And we're not paying 470K to throw recycling.
so where does the money go for the
It's a cost.
crappy bags right now?
So,
Just for trash.
right.
Okay,
Would
so
we get
the,
rid of the bags?
Oh, I would love to get rid
It
of
depends.
them.
Sometimes yes, sometimes
I
no.
hate the
no, the
bags.
old people,
Hate
not,
the
excuse
bag.
me, people who don't have a lot of trash, which tends to be people who have smaller households, don't wanna get rid of the bags. I've seen it on Facebook.
Well, you might get smaller toters too.
Cause the bags, if you only have one trash bag, like my house, we need to use 2 or 3, right? So it costs me more, understandably.
I know when my kids were away, they put a small.
Right, like you can use a smaller bag.
So it's really cost shifting. So,
Yeah.
so you're taking the cost of running the trash program off of taxation and shifting it directly to the users.
And so what is the cost of, so these are theoretical questions, not to answer right now, but obviously
Yeah.
there's the cost of administering the program, right? Like getting people to actually pay you. And then do people dump their trash places because they have to pay to get rid of it? They already have to pay to get rid of the trash, so we're just sort of,
They're not paying that, so now it's being covered by taxation.
but the trash, you have to buy the bag, so they won't take it.
The trash is self-sufficient.
Right, but the trash program.
Okay.
The trash program is being 50% covered by the bags, 50% is coming out of taxation. It would shift in a way in how that looks, whether it's bags or whatever. There's a lot of discussions that happen and there's pros and cons. But in short, the most simple thing is that the users,
Yeah,
the residents, would be paying that fee
right.
in some way and cover the costs of the trash program.
Right, and in some towns, they don't do that, is my understanding, because they don't want people just throwing trash on the side of the road when they don't want to pay for the,
So municipalities run anywhere from you
Right.
have no trash to the
Right.
town covers it.
Exactly.
Right.
Another, because I think we are on a 2 or 3 year contract with a new company. 3. Another easier approach would be to simply eliminate recycling pickup and put it a sorting facility at the DPW that if you have recycling, you just go there, you sort it and you put it in the bins. That usually saves, and a lot of towns around us of similar size. Well,
Throwing it all away.
well, but you know, but here's the thing. The advantage of that is if I don't want to go to the transfer station, I'm paying for the yellow bag to throw my trash. And we also take it away from, there are people that have dumpsters, have different trash program, and they recycle for free in town. And I know of that. So if we, more easily, we can just do this one change where there's no recycling pickup. Everything's in a yellow trash bag. And if you want to recycle, go to the DPW like a transfer station.
But we can't get into deciding on the policies now. What I'm trying to get at is make a list of things that we think
Right,
are
and
worth
that's a
examining.
possible
Okay?
solution.
So the enterprise fund for trash.
but how does the school, so I was thinking, when you brought up trash, I was thinking about it with the school too. Is there something that, we're just talking about on the town side? I have no idea what the school, we just must have dumpsters, right? Yeah, you've only been on the job 7 days, so I am not,
But I think going back to buying power, anything like trash pickup, we should be having one back.
yes, okay.
I think it would help others, because some people do use like waste management or others
Yeah.
privately. But they may opt into this because we could probably negotiate a town-wide deal, so.
Because we have more buying power.
Because we will buy.
Okay. Now, at one point in time, and it may have expired, the select board hired Jamie Toll to do an evaluation of all of these trash issues. So maybe the town needs to either go back to his contract or at least talk about that.
Yeah, he still consults.
He does, okay, so that's something we can put on his plate. should be on our list for consolidation, or just efficiencies in general?
I think some of the DPW items have the opportunity for regionalization. So for example, things that we do 20 times a year, but we buy a big heavy $500,000 piece of equipment to do it with. If we could get into a 5-pound kind of deal, we might be able to do it more efficiently.
Or look at renting instead of buying. When you need the equipment, you rent it.
We've talked about trying to do something like that with busing. Because our bus contract is a gun to the head every time we negotiate. We have no options. We have no competitors. It goes up every year at a rate that outstrips inflation. If we could do something like that with, you know, other towns in the area that also don't have their own buses, even just threatening to do that might lower the price a little bit. But I think that that's something that we've got to put on the list.
We're all on.
We've got to have some regional pooling of resources for large, you know, expenses outside of buildings.
Like we do with the Showboat Board of Health.
Yeah.
We couldn't afford our Board of Health, we outsourced it.
So that gets us a little bit off of our focus, because I think that is more exclusively schools, right? I mean, is there something that involves?
Yeah, but if we're gonna start like a regionalization effort with things maybe like trash or the heavy equipment, then we can.
I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with
Tony,
the
the
idea,
school takes care of the trash now, like it's got its own contract or something, okay.
Okay. Any other ideas of things that we think that where there's some benefit to or
I'd like to talk about
efficiency?
HR.
Okay, let's talk about HR.
Yeah?
I think we
Do
have
you
a
think
good opportunity.
HR's?
Say it again?
You think HR is something that could be an opportunity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Explore that, because I don't know what, more detail, what do you mean by that?
Well, I think right now HR, the functions are split between what the schools do and what the town does, and I think there's fragmentation there, and I think we could be more efficient if there was a unification of that so that there was 1 or 2 people doing that work instead of having it be so fragmented as it is now.
Employed by the town or employed by the school?
I
Just
think,
one person.
I actually think that that would be somebody that'd be employed by the town, because there's lots of employment and contract management that the town does, that I think is important, all the benefits management the town does right now. And so I think if we continue along that route, that's just an area to explore more, how we could be more efficient.
That's great. There's some quiet people that haven't said anything. I haven't heard from Caesar at all.
Sorry.
He runs a meeting on a Tuesday night for 4
He's
hours.
a good note taker.
Hasn't said a word.
Are we gonna talk about health insurance?
We can.
Health insurance is on for August, but specifically, but I mean, we're already under one system, so I don't think it's consolidating. I know some folks want to move the health insurance just to the town budget, but no. It doesn't matter, it's one bucket, it's just one bucket.
I would be interested, maybe we can talk about it in August, that I don't, or maybe you can send me something. I don't know how the health insurance process works to negotiate, and, you know, I've heard the GIC for some people is been a cost savings. I know in the last year that is not true, so I don't, you know, I don't know that that's a be-all, end-all. I'm just curious, sort of, I don't know, like, I believe there's a committee in town of unions or something like that. Maybe you just can send me a link and I can read it or whatever. And like, how often do we look at it, you know, all that kind of stuff. What?
This is the review cycle.
Yeah, so I would just be curious how that all works, because obviously it was a huge, huge increase last year, and it looks like it's probably going to be again.
Yeah, so just to stick on this just for one moment.
Yeah.
We had a 14.8% increase from Maya, Blue Cross Blue Shield. We are looking at, we've been told that at minimum, it's a 14.8 increase next year already, based on kind of some stuff that's happening at higher levels. Who knows what that's gonna look like in about 6 months from now. There is what's called PEC, Public Employee Committee. Public Employee Committee that we have a contract that we just renewed for another year with the PEC, basically extending the terms and conditions of the current healthcare plan for one more year. But that is a negotiation that needs to take place with the PEC about changing, whether it's providers, splits, different things that are offered. That's just kind of a highlight on health insurance.
Okay.
But that's something you've targeted for your August agenda of this committee.
Well, that's just to really go, so the August, once we come out of tonight, you're gonna start hearing kind of preliminary budgets where we think things are landing, so we're gonna do the math for what the budget looks like for health insurance for that August one, if we're making some assumptions.
So if we're talking about things, not just assumptions, what levers does the town have?
I think that the levers are really negotiating with the PEC.
Yeah, there's really not a lot of other, like putting it out to bid or anything like that.
We can. I think GIC on larger organizations is okay to manage. At a small level, administering the GIC is very unwieldy.
Okay.
Maya is kind of like the top show in town. There have been some regional blind collaboratives that started, I want to say about 5 or so years ago. They are failing. People are going back. I mean, it's almost a monopoly with Maya.
It's insane.
So Cape Cod has a collaborative, right? My son's now a vice principal at Cape Cod, and he said their health insurance rates do not increase much.
So
Yeah, like in the private sector, it's only 5% a year.
Yeah, mine didn't go up that
Okay,
much.
so I would encourage folks to watch, and I'll send out the link, where our advisor came and talked about the difference between insurance in the public sector versus the private sector. There are only certain folks who will insure us because of our risk pool. And so we carry people for their life. That's a huge difference.
Yeah, that's why I get you.
And
yeah, because it goes on.
Yeah.
And how does it work with Medicare? So people who are public employees don't go on Medicare.
So there's the plan is called MedX, and then it's like a supplemental option for them. But we don't have a lot of leverage around healthcare.
I can understand that.
All right, so let's focus that on the August meeting so that we make our 10 p.m. deadline.
We're doing great.
Say it again.
It's only 8:25.
I know.
25. We're doing great.
We could end early.
Yeah.
We're not required to stay at 10.
That's right, we could end early.
Let's keep
Questions
moving.
to an email.
I think we're doing good.
But I was going to call on Caesar. I haven't heard from Caesar at all, and it's making me nervous. So tell me where you're at on all of this conversation.
Where am I at on all of this? I mean, I think especially like facilities, I think there was a lot of discussion. It's kind of hard to know. I think it's worth exploring, but it's really hard to know whether or not it would help services or not. I think I'm pretty concerned that Jody seems to be a strong no on that. Same with IT, but I still think facilities is worth exploring. HR seems to be worth exploring. Yeah, I don't know, just my notes so far, but.
Legal.
Yeah.
And buying power, right? I think those are the 4 things we really seem to,
On the school side, not on the town side. They have a pretty good deal going on.
Well, right, but to consolidate with them, is there a way that we could?
And we have a good lawyer.
Yeah, it's very good.
Zeke, what do you see as any place where you think where there's some?
Well, I was going back to Renee's comment earlier, and everybody's saying buying power, but what does that mean, right? It's a collective purchasing for both departments, because with the increased efficiencies within, let's say, irrigation, you had mentioned, easily purchase a larger contract for a longer term at a reduced rate.
Yeah.
And I think, in an operations standpoint, the budget task force specifically, we looked at collective purchasing, maybe a procurement department for both areas. Just expanding that a little bit larger, so you would maybe have a team for the school, a team for the town, but it's overseen by one
Procurement
department
person.
head. So creating a new, larger department to oversee something like that.
Ezzy, would that also include like paying invoices, streamlining that whole process?
Yeah, streamlining accounts payable, we had
Yep.
talked about that,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
And streamlining, the finance piece as well.
Grant management. would fall
Grant
under- yeah.
management as
Yep.
well.
I can see that as a real benefit.
Yeah, because that's another one that we have two small groups.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I had advocated for a grant manager for the town prior to town meeting. The funding just wasn't there. However, having a grant manager on staff, tracking KPIs, tracking reporting, making sure we're on time. Are we pulling funding down from the state? Are we having all that data and grant writing, and who's managing everybody on task? You have individual staff members doing that individually, but having a central department with all, that's just their focus, that will increase our leverage and our capacity to find new grants that we're just not taking advantage of.
We got grant services.
We have $50,000 in grant writer, that's getting the grant in the door. He's talking about what happens once we have the grant.
It's a management.
Who is making sure that all the reporting deadlines are being met, that whatever authorizing agency has whatever they need back, that the invoices are being paid and organized. I kind of see it as, if we do this, it would be really like director of procurement, that under that title would have grant management and overall contract management, but it's just really streamlining all that reporting.
And I just wanted to add too, with the department heads are used to the grants that they have every year. They go ahead and they reapply, they may hear something from their associations and things like that. But who's really doing the research on what's available that's never been looked at before? That's the missing piece I think the town is missing upon. And there's an opportunity there that I think that hasn't been fully explored. And we had mentioned that in the budget task force.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Got something we think we can consolidate and get better services together? This doesn't have to be an exhaustive list, but I think we created quite a good conversation about it. I think that was productive. I think you need a new moderator. You got 2 years left, Bernard. Your wife would be an excellent moderator. Oh,
You would never be able to speak.
All right, so I'm going to move on to the next general item, which is talking about departmental growth. We already had the chief talk to us about what he needs to do in his department. Is this a kind of a general category? People want to talk about where they see their different areas needing to grow?
I can go. Don't mind, I'll go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think that one of the things that the school department is looking at, and one of the things that came up in the budget task force, is that there are certain kinds of jobs in the school department that have an outsized impact on costs. And so the example that Dr. Gilson and Dr. Burnham brought up at the budget task force was the role of something called BCBA. And I don't know if everybody knows what BCBA is, but so BCBA works with special ed students to create a behavior plan. And their behavior plan involves coordinated care and education with a bunch of different people inside the building. The paraprofessionals that work with them, the special education teachers, staff and administrators. But basically they sort of, and Dr. Fortuna, tell me when I get this wrong.
I would tell you when you go.
What Dr. Gilson and Dr. Burnham have found was using BCBAs to the maximum as a way to supplement what special ed teachers and paraprofessionals do helps Lunenburg retain a higher percentage of our students in district. So the research shows that keeping kids in district is not just better for special ed kids, but it's also better for the non-special ed kids that interact with them. The big issue that we look at from a systems perspective is the fact that sending kids out of district for placement is prohibitively expensive. I think that the low end is, you know, $400,000 a year. The high end is, one of the ones that I know of from my work in New Hampshire, Seven Hills, I think starts at like $750,000 for certain kinds of care. And because of the way that the funding mechanisms work within the state, we, the town and the school, take the hit the first year, and then we get a certain percentage paid back the following year. But because we can't control when people move into town and whether they move into town with kids in out of district placement, we have this cost issue. Chris had proposed an idea that I think would help insulate us from those shocks. But if we have people in the district that do the work of BCBAs, we can keep more of those people and not have to worry about the shock. If you look at the data from that we got from comparable towns who were doing the budget task force, we are sending out somewhere between a quarter to half as many students as towns in other places on a per capita basis. And that's because I think our special ed teachers are amazing and they do really great work, but I also think it's because we've supplemented them wisely with BCBAs. So expanding the people that do special education work and expanding BCBAs I think would be helpful. I also think Emily, she probably has a lot more knowledge of this because this is what she does for a living.
Good, call on somebody who hasn't spoken yet. Thank you.
I agree with you all the way. I think if we're going to keep BCBAs, though, we need to keep our paraprofessionals as well, and our MTSSs, because if we identify kids that are needing extra help and we don't have anyone to support that, then we're still going to be sending kids out of district, and we're still going to be spending more money on busing and out of district schooling. So we've got a lot of those people. So I think having more of the people other than just the BCBA, that's a good place to start, but we need the support underneath them as well. Otherwise, we're going to end up right back.
We need the ability, I think, to create in-district programming. More
And so we're all on the same page. We have an obligation to educate every student and provide a free, appropriate public education based on federal statute and U.S. Supreme Court case law. We do not have any mechanism to provide, you know, universal funding. So it's like we get some funding for special education here and some funding from the state for this, but the cost driver for schools, aside from the ones that everybody has, which are healthcare and labor costs, our costs are driven a lot by this mandate to educate students. And in part, it's because the mandate is relatively new and where the edges are keep going out, but also because the rate at which people are being diagnosed with conditions that entitle them to special education services are increasing dramatically. I think that some of the studies show that the rate of autism has increased 200% in 10 years. And it's not just the fact that people are more aware of it, it's the fact that based on the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the definition of some of these conditions that require special education services in a school setting has changed and been made more expansive. So for example, autism used to be a discrete set of different conditions. So you have autism, you have Asperger's, and now under the DSM-5 TR, they are a spectrum disorder. That means that there are a lot of people who were not captured before that are captured now. For example, in the 1970s and 80s, it was almost impossible for a female student to be diagnosed with autism. And now the rate of autism diagnoses among genders is almost identical. The rate of autism diagnosis among minorities was almost zero in the 70s and 80s, and now it is almost normalized. And so we see two forces, one that's medical and one that's legal, that are putting a huge cost pressure on the schools that's different than other departments in town. It's not to say that they don't have their own endemic cost pressures, but that's our endemic cost pressure, and that's where I think that we could spend money and, you know, spend a nickel to save a dime. in the long
Okay,
run.
all right. Other growth categories, issues that could be identified that people wanted to address?
I think just generally speaking, what I would want as a finance committee member is to see the trends of each department. Not just school department one member, right? Break it down by, you already have categories of, say, the data details. But what has it been, and what do we anticipate it going to? And what metrics drive those decisions for what it's going to? And maybe we're not 100% right, but at least we have an understanding as to why it is increasing or when it might decrease based on certain things. And if we're going to put in a method, if we're going to put in something that says there is a return on investment, I want to see that that return is actually being realized, right? So to me, the trends is pretty important, and maybe that gets a little bit into how to present data. But I think, Anna and Renee did a great job of getting data from the schools, compiling it, putting it into one spot where you can start to look at things. Yeah. And we should have the questions is, why did something go up by that amount? And then maybe it's a little easier on the rest of the departments. At one point the police were looking to be at a certain level, but every year I want to know, like, what is the hiring plan across those things?
Can I just add one more thing? You said trends and made me think of something. 2 Fridays ago, the U.S. Supreme Court announced a new requirement for school districts to provide forms of alternative instruction, and no one yet knows what that means, and no one yet knows who bears the cost. We have a draft policy that follows Alito's command to look at Minnesota's statute, and that statute places the cost for alternative instruction on the people requesting it, but we do not know what the state is going to do, and we do not know what parents are going to do. And quite frankly, the extension of law that happened in that case was radical and completely unexpected.
Can you describe?
Yeah, sure. So the case is called Mahmoud versus Stevens. It was a case brought by a group of parents in the Baltimore, Maryland school district area, and what they objected to was certain books that were being taught in class, and the books, according to Alito, were part of an agenda to promote LGBTQA+ items. He selected some of the books in a kind of like mean, make funning of them kind of way, but his point was that religious people should not have to have their children be exposed to this in school, and that the school board in that district was at fault for not allowing parents to opt out. The problem that Alito and the people that were supporting him did not consider is who pays for this, which is always the problem for school districts, who pays for this. And so at the end of his opinion, the majority opinion, it was a 6-3 majority for exactly the way everybody anticipated to be broken down. He highlighted 3 statutes, one from Wisconsin, one from Pennsylvania, and one from Minnesota. And the Minnesota one, I looked at all 3, and the Minnesota one does not require the people requesting the alternative education to be paid for by the school. The problem is there's still going to be some costs for the school based on Alito's opinion. So one of the things that we will have to do as part of the school district is even if they do the alternative instruction, we still have an obligation to look at it and grade it. And so we may build them, I guess, I don't know. We don't even know. It came down 2 days ago, or 2 weeks ago. But if we have to have somebody on staff to look over what the work is and coordinate the submission of work, that's just cost that we can't avoid anymore. It's just like free appropriate public education. We have 6 people in Washington, D.C. telling us that we're going to raise your costs without providing you any funding. So I don't know what the answer is, but I could foresee that it would be very expensive on a per pupil basis. And it's brand new, like 2 weeks ago. So trends are not helpful for us.
I think.
We are not getting cheaper trains. That's what I would like to see.
I think one of the things too that is going to impact our budget is the elimination of some of the title grants, Title IIA, Title IVA, and Title III. Title IIA and 4A are largely for professional development and growth of teachers. Title III is for the education of multilingual learners. And the federal government, when you read the headline that they eliminated $108 million from the state, that's what they're talking about. That has caused the governor to be more conservative in her budget for what she was allowing for earmarks as well, which will impact us. But the loss of those grant funds are going to have an impact on, if not the ask, the quality of education that we can provide.
Can I ask a question?
That's another thing from a finance committee perspective I think we've asked for in the past, both on the town side and is don't just look at raise and appropriate as the budget you give to us. I really want to see all the grants that are coming in, what we project to see year over year on those grants, and how they roll out into kind of operations.
That's fair enough.
I know we have a new superintendent, but the previous superintendent did put a 5-page memo together for us with Dr. Gilson that we saw 2 weeks ago about projections for the next 2 years. I don't know if the finance committee has seen that yet, but I'm happy to share it with you guys. It is not a final number or anything, but I thought it was really helpful. It talked about, built-in costs already on, staffing and busing and a few of those other things. So I'm happy to share that or have Jen share that with the group. But it does include the numbers of some of the grants at least that the superintendent just mentioned.
Since the superintendent brought up the headlines today, I know in some of those headlines, some school districts knew that they were having pretty immediate impacts that was affecting their programs right now. Do we have any of those immediate impacts this summer?
Not this summer.
Okay.
Just so everybody's clear, we, for whatever reason, I don't believe we ever received the Harvard students letter that some districts did. What?
What is that?
You mean the letter about swearing not to teach DEI?
Yes.
And
We did not, and I'm not sure if that's still true, but we did not get that letter. So my guess is there's a correlation between districts that got that letter and that lost their funding.
I wouldn't count.
I don't know what the letter is. Somebody tell me.
I wouldn't count on that.
So the Trump administration sent out a letter saying that you swear or affirm as a member of the school district that you have not taught DEI in violation of the Harvard student case.
Okay.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, we never got theirs.
I don't think you're looked at as a town that teaches DEI, that's why.
Huh.
Honestly, to be completely bluntly honest.
I don't think I think that my guess is that they targeted people that had large school districts or school districts that they did, in towns that they didn't like. I don't think there was any.
Or someone who's openly
Openly on their
teaching DEI. Not that it's not an important thing to teach, it is, but I don't think when they go, oh, Lunenburg, they're the one.
Yeah.
So everyone's aware, this is the sort of situation we're dealing with because we do get money from the grants, and when they dry up suddenly, and we were counting on them to pay for things, we're cutting even more, and it's very frustrating to be part of a department that is continuously having to chip away at what we can offer children, especially when we're being asked to do so much more, and we have to by state law. There are certain things that are required that we have to do because of the law, which I think is something to keep in mind. I know that Tony got some blowback for asking during the budget task force, what are we statutorily required to do as a town? Are we required to have a fire department? Are we required to have a police department? Are we required to pave the roads? But the truth is, there are things we are required to do by law. And when we don't have enough money to do those things, it's making it very difficult.
Okay. We're a little bit off the topic, which was supposed to be, or was labeled as growth, and now we're talking about, losing grants and,
I think
So
Sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Moderator. I just think from the school department's perspective, we just want to make sure that we are clear about the fact that we are not in a position right now asking for a lot of growth. We really are in a position of looking
That's
to
fine.
preserve services.
I thought Tony's point about retaining the kids, that we need to hire these,
Yeah, I
have
think
more
that's
of
a
these.
very good
I
point.
keep getting it wrong. PCBA?
B.
Say it again.
I would just agree with what Chris said, is that we need maybe it's a 3 to 5 year plan of what your departments are gonna look like, how are they gonna grow, or are they gonna stay the same size person-wise, and then what your budget's gonna look like. But I think it's not just the budget, it's also your staff. What is your projection of your staff?
One area that I did hear that hasn't been mentioned yet, but I heard during finance committee process, is a strong desire, and I'm just trying to see if this is still there, a strong desire to make rec full-time.
I can speak on that as former rec person in Arlington for 15 years. I think that goes to interdepartmental growth as well. I do see in Lunenburg that we do put a lot of value in our current staff, and they grow up through the ranks. Perfect example is our police chief, right? He grew up through the ranks, that he was trained properly, and he became the chief. And I think that's what we want to see in a town like Lunenburg, people coming in and being able to grow. In accordance with the Parks and Rec Department, in Arlington, we were at $1 million deficit. In 3 years, we were at a $1.5 million profit generated through Parks and Rec in general. I also implement that program in Winchester, in North Reading, and in Andover. So it can be done in towns and cities. And I see a really great opportunity to have this department head, a very strategically interviewed person who's going to have all of the things, you know, grant knowledge, facilities knowledge, all the things that a good director would have. And I do see, and I think it also goes back to shared space with the schools. All of these other cities who generated revenue shared spaces with the schools. And it cut their costs down, and it also gave the schools a little bit more money because some of that general fund money, they put this money in the general fund, in a revolving fund, I'm sorry, and then it was allocated to some general funds across the board. And I think there's a good opportunity to, you have water here, you have parks, although you voted down a beautiful park, I don't know. You know, you have green space, you have hiking, you have really great people, you know, so you have all the components to make a really good Parks and Recreation Department. And a lot of good people on the committee and that have talked to me about it. And I think it would be a great move for a full-time position.
Okay. So that's another growth area.
Yeah. You know, one thing that I just want to add to what Tanya said. So currently in Lunenburg, a little over a third of our population is over the age of 50, or actually over the age of 50 is more like 40%. Households with children school age, the last time I did in a rough count was about 13% of you know. So we have a large population in town that is supporting our school districts. And when we look at other towns that have, you know, very strong school district, a lot of times you get that population unbalanced, where it's something like 30% of all households have, you know, kids in their school district. And what that does financially is that your taxes are going to go up because you're going to need to fund to keep, you know, to put more kids through the school district. One thing that I personally see is, you know, I just turned 50. I have another, you know, hopefully another 35 to 40 years of paying property taxes. I'd love to stay in Lunenburg. And, you know, making the town a friendly, welcoming community for the residents that don't have kids. And that's through programming, you know, making some of the facilities that we have accessible, creating ways for people to do that is how we make the town attractive. And that's something to keep in mind because, you know, our property taxes are pretty high. I mean, I think a lot of people that I'm looking here, I think the majority of us don't have kids in the school district. And I'd like to continue doing that, but it is important to make the town attractive to that other, you know, 65%, or actually 85% of the households.
So that supports the idea of growth in the rec department, full-time position, okay. What else, where else are there, you know, strong needs for growth?
Jen, did any of the, I don't remember any.
I know libraries further out on growth, not, so it's not in the next fiscal year, but it's in the next 3, so that'll come into like the longer term plan. I saw you say this building, or this department, I don't think that there's headcount growth. I've heard conversations about a title change or a title expansion, but not a plus headcount.
Did the last budget move their food services person to full-time like they had asked?
So it increased the so that's already happened.
Okay.
That the hours, basically pulling some positions off of a grant, funding them through operation and increasing one up to 32. But I haven't heard anything about plus adding headcount here.
Okay, but that already got done last.
Yeah, that already.
last budget. Okay, that's what I wanted to make sure that that had been achieved.
And police is on a steady course, right?
Yep.
They were projecting to go up, but I think they're steady.
They're steady. So other than
DPW?
I'm not hearing growth there.
Depending on what happens, like HR consolidation, procurement.
That'll all have,
Yep.
yeah, that'll all have flags. Or tentacles. Yes.
All right, so it sounds like we've got a sense of where that's at. And, you know, I'm sure schools are going to get working on those 3 really issues. And I think maybe you want to get with Jen and talk more about the rec position, since you've got a lot of experience in 4 or 5 towns with that. Okay. Yeah, well, they're both excited about it. She does too. Okay, so that kind of gets us through that agenda item. Let's talk about specific things that you want to request about this board and what you're doing in the meeting tonight. You know, do you want to continue to meet here? You know, should we be meeting at a place? I know Mr. Rogers leave. Is he still here? Dave, you're still here?
Yeah.
We left. Okay. You know, but you know, we could broadcast live so that people could see the good work that you're doing. But we can't broadcast live, I don't think, in here. We could broadcast live maybe at the school if their facility would handle 17 people. I don't know. I think Town Hall could accommodate this entire group, and it's certainly a place where you're all familiar and comfortable, I think, and the townspeople are comfortable. And I think the townspeople, my own personal opinion, be a little like, why are they meeting over at the Adult Activity Center? You know, this is in town.
There's discussion of the library as well, an option.
Yeah.
Oh, the library. Good thinking. Thank you, Brian.
It's just booked a lot, was the problem.
Yeah, we'd have to get we'd have to get way ahead of their schedule, which is good.
I like the idea of using different town facilities. Let's do a tour.
No.
Oh my gosh, I know. Not so
That's where we're going, let's make one plan.
I know, but I think it's nice to have the people in, we'll go to the schools and we'll go to look at the library and.
We'll go to Brookson's.
Do you think we're discussing the live component? I know that Mr. Rogers was extremely
Yep,
upset
Dave
that we
Rogers,
did not
pretty
have-
upset. Yep.
And there might be others that want to know what we're doing behind closed doors. And
Yeah.
I don't know if we're under the bylaws, to have to active with this up there, good. But maybe we could have every other be a public meeting or something, so that the town doesn't feel like we're
It's a public.
sneaky. Well, public to Zoom, because not everybody can get out, not everybody, you know, if they have kids, they're doing bedtimes, like it's difficult. But to make something visible Zoom-wise, and we can work with our wonderful media services department to find out where that would be.
I wonder if we want to have a public hearing component instead. I mean, not instant, like in addition to, like instead of worrying about having these meetings. I mean, I think we should just have a place we can all sit together like this, so I don't actually care where it is. I think the town hall just is problematic because of where the stage is and stuff. But I think we should have personally, maybe just, I mean, I'll volunteer to be the school committee member if people, at least one member from every committee, and just post a public hearing, and if people want to come talk to us about what they think about the budget, we should
when we end this.
You know, like have an opportunity, this group is meeting, do you have anything to tell us?
If we are on schedule.
Yeah.
With the cadence that has been established.
Yeah.
We'll be wrapping up in January,
Yeah.
which is right before we go into the normal. And this is the thought, this is just gonna feed that process, the normal budgetary process. I think, at least on the finance committee's agenda, or actually on all the agendas that were passed, posted, it said that while there's not an opportunity for public comment here, bring that public comment back to those stakeholder boards. I don't know that having a public hearing, because public hearings typically contemplate that then there's going to be a vote. And
Or like a listening tour is what the legislature would call it, a
Yeah.
listening session.
Session where we hear, but then what are we asking about? What are we looking for input on?
I mean,
Why can't we meet at town hall? I mean, everybody doesn't have to be up on the stage.
Well,
Can't we clear that room and get
Yeah,
17?
can we move the chairs? I mean,
Yeah.
this would fit.
Nobody should be on the stage. I hate that
We
stage.
can do a
Nobody on the
square.
stage, everybody down around.
Can we fit a square?
we can absolutely
We can't fit a.
do this at town hall. We can absolutely do this live if it's from town hall and certain other spaces. There was somewhat of a feeling when we chose either this space or the library was the ideal space of wanting to have a place that was relatively neutral. If folks do not feel strongly about that, then the second floor of town hall is fine. The school committee room is fine, right? Like, so.
I just think we should, we're supposed to be transparent in this, and people are getting along famously, so I don't think we need to worry about, domains and where we are, I don't think. But it would be nice, we've got to have David in my ear every single
well,
time.
right, no, I mean, I guess nobody liked my listening
You
tour
know,
idea, but like,
actually-
I just kind of think we should have a meeting like with the representatives from the three boards, and like, I mean, people do this all the time, and maybe nobody will come, but we post it and we just say, the three boards are working together and
Yeah.
meeting on things, if you have anything you want us to consider, speak now or forever hold
Well,
And that way, a lot
I mean,
of
that's
these
kind of-
meetings will not be so long, right?
Right, like-
Instead of having public, I would sign up to do it manually.
Yeah, like the two of us, and if we could get someone from the select board possibly, I know you guys have a lot of meetings, but like just to have a night where people say, we're sitting here and we'll listen, what do people have to
But
say?
that's-
And if we can announce or put it on the ledger, like do the.
Yeah.
But I think that it doesn't address the fact that we've already got meetings planned, and I just want to know where your meetings.
Oh,
those
yeah,
meetings
wherever you
are.
guys decide is fine, I don't care.
If you want to have an open, a listening tour kind of a thing, which I think is excellent, and if the finance committee could have another meeting with all of you, if ever could schedule another meeting with your schedules, I would really know. Well,
So just a question,
Go
if we
ahead.
set up town halls like this, would you be able to take live?
Yeah.
I guess, okay, I kind of feel comfortable in here.
Does town hall have air conditioning?
Is it air
Yes.
Yeah.
conditioned? Yeah. Yeah, I
It's
know.
rug roasting.
Yeah, what happened with that?
So are we committed not to have public comment during these meetings?
Well, let me get to where we're meeting, and then let's talk about public comment. So, not that I have a vote in any of this, but I'd like to meet at town hall. I'd like to have it live, I'd like to let people know where we are, that we're, available, who we are, et cetera, and so on. I just think that's what transparency kind of thing means.
Would we be able to set it up like this and still have seating for people? I mean, town hall's kind of awkward for.
Would have to move, like, but I don't want to touch that big table, so we'd have to move basically the chairs out of the way, set it up in the back.
You got a facilities people that can do that? You want to borrow them from the school?
Well, I don't know, we'll see if they set up for my ice cream social tomorrow. Or I'm setting up tables.
Can we do live from the school? Because the media room will fit.
Yeah, we could definitely.
Can we do live from the school?
Although it might be warm.
We
haven't done
Okay.
Say it again?
On
You do or
TV?
do not?
Can you broadcast to Channel 8?
Could we like, I'm not,
Once. Why can't we do live on the internet? Sports live?
Yeah, can we do live here?
No, we can't do live here.
I'm not one of the chairs, but could we just say like, hey, can we give Jen the job of figuring out, like, do we
Yeah.
all care where we are?
All right,
As
so-
long as we can be live, then we can be.
I guess the
And the
goal
audio is good.
live,
Yeah.
good audio,
Air conditioning.
Air conditioning.
I don't care for that.
And a view.
Okay. So.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
I'm going to move the discussion to my one vote and since the rest of you aren't voting as boards, I'd like to see us do it in town hall, okay? So, let's.
I volunteer to
let's
come early and set up the tables.
Yeah,
Right?
let's-
I will
let's-
come
Let's make that happen. And then I already forgot what we were gonna do is the second thing. I said, first let's figure out where,
Oh,
the
public
public comment. So talk to me about public comment. Where are people at on that? Yeah, you could actually finish this meeting before the 10 o'clock deadline, but if you have public comment, you're gonna make it to 10 o'clock.
So I like Mandy's idea better, because allows for conversation with residents. Public comment, technically, we don't have to reply, we don't have to engage. So I would prefer an environment that, we can engage with people that would like to participate. And I would sign up, and, it would be a different setting. We wouldn't be having these discussions. We would be just really listening to the public and have conversation.
Yeah.
I would say historically, people don't show up at those things. They have the 2 Marshall Park ones, no one showed up.
Not one person, other than Dave Passios, showed up to any budget task force, other than the people on there. Laura showed up once, you showed up once.
But
He doesn't even live in town.
But the thing is, if you don't do it, then people can complain at the end. If you do it, then you say, and like personally, I know the school committee last year when Brian was running the superintendent search committee, I thought he did a lot of work. I'm not sure people really responded, but maybe not a survey, but we had an inbox where people could send emails and stuff. I think if we're gonna be like a group that's taking feedback, we should have an email address that's send us an email about what you think of the future of the town, and come to one of our public comment sessions. And then if no one comes, no one comes.
So there's no harm in trying.
Yeah, can we open it up to the public with no public comment section, and maybe have a survey that no public comment?
Oh, these meetings is public, so people could come watch, right? But they just can't
Yes,
speak.
no comment, but maybe have a survey link where they can input questions.
Just talk, Renee.
But you're next to them, so.
Very nice.
She does, that's true. Go ahead.
So, the problem I have with the listening session with just a representative from each board is that the rest of us may not hear what's going on. So if we're gonna have public comment, I would be more in favor of having a very strict, and this is where moderator comes in, time limit and time for public comment, 15 minutes, that's it. Everyone gets 3 minutes per person for public comment. Then we all hear the same thing, same comment at the same time.
Can I offer an alternative suggestion? So the way that this goes is after tonight, we start hearing from specific boards, or departments and boards, really. So those meetings, we're gonna be tight to get out of here before 10. On those meetings. So that kind of concludes August, September, October, we're through the bulk of that. Does it make sense to, instead of doing it 15 minutes where 5 people can speak for 3 minutes each, to have a standalone at the end of October that's just a listening session before we proceed into November, December, and January? That this is we're now, you've seen, you've watched live, you've watched the previews, feedback, everything you heard, we're gonna sit here for an hour.
I don't know if the public would like that, and it limits them. What if they're not available at that time?
Well, we do too.
Then they can
We do it.
submit
playing devil's advocate.
Submit it in writing.
What if we did a Zoom during the day and one at night, so people had 2 different options?
One meeting.
Tony's gonna start twitching over
They still have all the norms, so this is all, let's just remind ourselves why we're here. Let's remind ourselves why we're here. This is all a preview to the regular budget season, where there is lots of feedback as we get specific.
Yeah, I don't think we should honestly open it up for comment at each meeting, because we have enough to do. I mean, that's just me.
I'm not opposed to a time-restricted public comment, but I do feel that each of our committees also have a public comment section in our meetings and that we're going to be continuing on.
Yeah.
I also put in the finance committee agenda that where they could, well, I didn't do that, I was going to get to that, that they could email all members of the finance committee with any issues. And then the Lunenburg Public School Committee also said you can email the finance committee.
I know that was great, and I think now
I think we should do that. I mean,
all of the bus slips will go through.
Yeah, all the best. Sorry about that.
Moderator, I think we should put in civic engagement is super important. We open our meetings publicly via Zoom. We have a survey or a link that they can put questions in. Maybe we designate 15 minutes at the next meeting at the opening to go over anything that came in, which I think is going to be nothing, or very little. And then, as Jen suggested, have one large open meeting at the end where we do listen to residents talk. Or at the midsection.
Yeah, in the midsection.
Okay.
Middle's good.
I will add that to Jen's point, this is all in preparation for the budget season. So there will be plenty of opportunity for public comment during the actual budget hearings, during the normal budget cycle. This is all work preliminary to get there. I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Yeah.
To have one stand-up meeting at the end makes sense.
Yep.
But to have it as we go along, I feel will deter the process. Because the comments will come after, because this is just preparation. This is not the actual budget season. This will happen in January to March.
All right, so let me just, in general, nodding your head or raising your hand or whatever, can you live with what Jen is proposing sometime in, I think you said October, right?
Yeah, end of October.
End of October.
After we finish it.
And that'll make sure we give you the general public, give a personal invitation to Dave, make sure that he knows about the date and time, okay?
Yeah, and I think just to jump on that, part of it is not just the budget for next year, though. What I'm thinking we need public comment period, like public on, is the idea that we may be talking about consolidating services or efficiencies and some long-term planning, right? That we have been told the last few years, we don't have time for during the regular budget process. So I do want to be clear that I think my personal opinion is we are looking at this, I am looking at this process as not just we're preparing for next year's budget. We are also preparing for the next 2 to 3 years if we're doing a good job, in my opinion.
It would be nice to make sure the employees are all
Right.
invited.
Yeah.
The employees should all be invited.
Yes.
Oh, yes, and some standard language during our meetings when they're public that, you know, if you have any questions, you can submit them to XYZ.
Yeah.
Right.
You know what I mean? So just as that's out there, we're just covering ourselves and engaging the residents, which is, I think, what they want. They want us to know that they can be engaged, and
Yes.
we're just not meeting in here in a secret little hole, you know?
Okay. Do we want to move on to financial management and best practices?
Yes.
That's on the agenda with the select board. I think it's probably on everybody's agenda.
Yep.
Okay. So I don't know what this topic is, so maybe we'll have Zeke tell us to start off. What should we be talking about with?
Well, I'm not
best
sure
practices?
what topic was the golden topic to begin with, but we can.
So I asked for this item to be put on the agenda.
Thank you.
Jen was giving, so a couple of things. So I'm just gonna say to the things that are, in terms of financial management best practice, that this past year has got us in trouble. And we need to look at these things and make sure we are all doing the best practice possible to not get in trouble. And for example, all our revolving accounts should have a budget, even if they're not in a town meeting revolving account. Because when we don't, there's no way for Ezekiel to see that these accounts are in the negative. And this past year, that the school year that just ended, unfortunately, one of those revolving accounts went on the negative, north of $100,000. And because we don't simply put a budget, because on that the system will then say, hey, you're in the negative, you passed your budget. It doesn't allow us to take more immediate action. It doesn't allow us to run the report and say, how are we doing according to our budget? You know, have we spent 3/4 of the budget in the end of the first quarter? So that kind of thing, I think it's something that we just need. We enter a budget for everything, even if it's not a town meeting revolving account that needs approval. And it uses that to help us control that money and not have these end of the year surprises that happen. And I think there are multiple accounts that have historically run into that issue. The other thing that I do see also as a problem is, and I'm not targeting the schools, but I did do a sort of a deep dive into schools processes and budgets this past year, this past few months. And the way we present the budget at town meeting, the way that the schools manage their budget and what they report to the state, which is mandatory reporting, is 3 different things. So if you think something can go wrong, it'll definitely go wrong under that system. Because when you ask, what's your head count? What is your head count on this line item budget that you asked for $150,000? How many head counts do you have there? And you don't have that answer, you're gonna run into trouble. So it's not about controlling, but it's really about, in the end of the day, your bookkeeping should be a reflection of what you budget, and your financial statements should be a story of what happened. And when these things are just not the same, it's very problematic. So I see this having cost us a lot of, we passed an override to educate the children, and we had to use some of that money because we didn't have controls on our accounts. And it's insulting to me as a taxpayer who voted for the override last year. So that's what I think we need to take, and I'll take the lead from Ezekiel because he sees that, to bring some proposals to us. What is that we're missing on, best practices, financial management, and some suggestions, and maybe from the school sides as well. And what should be implemented, but that is problematic.
I just want to say, I really appreciate you doing your deep dive, and I also think it's helpful that you point out the one particular revolving account. And I think that it was definitely, for me, the most frustrating thing that we dealt with last year. That this happened, how it happened, and how it was something that was essentially not picked up on until it was too late. I will say this, the process has been completely redone. There will be new people there, and the process will make sure that we have better controls. But I think that what I'm hearing from you is we need to have that same approach all throughout the budget, and I don't think you're wrong. I think that's the right thing. I also think that one of the things that the school has to consider, the school district has to consider, is why that one particular revolving account went out of whack. Was it a systems thing? Was it a personnel thing? Was it just that the schools are assuming too large of a percentage of certain costs?
I think there's actually more systematic to that, because if you enter a budget in Munis, that you can run reports that checks. I mean, simple as that, right? So we don't need to do a lot to fix that one simple issue, but I think there might be other things that.
That one's complicated.
We make things complicated when they aren't. Their business, they're run everywhere, and they have.
The very best attended school committee meeting I have ever been to, other than the one where we talked about mask mandates, was the one where we talked about sports funding. We packed the town hall. So when we say we made it more complicated than we need to, it is definitely self-inflicted.
So to honest point, when I came aboard, I started, not this February prior, came aboard and I talked to the schools and I said, I need an operational budget. What's your anticipated revenue for the revolving accounts? What are your costs? Do you have the revenues to offset? The instruction at the time is, well, we can't give that to you because we don't really know. And I went to them again as we entered the new year for FY25. I got the same response. What I started doing, what I started doing is we have those revolving accounts that are with the budget ceilings that are voted at town meeting. I reach out to those individual committees like Parks, Conservation, and I ask them for a budget to enter to Munis, simple revenue expenses to make sure that we don't go over those ceilings. But that doesn't mean that you don't do that for every revolving account. That's what's been lacking, and it's never happened. It's never happened. And when I talk to the various boards with the ones that we do vote on at town meeting, they don't know what I'm talking about. So I have to give them a budget template.
Right.
What are your revenues? It's
I
very simple, very structured.
Right.
You know, you have 10,000, 5,000 supplies, 5,000 contract. It's not that overly complicated.
But what I would like is for us to not necessarily do a whole audit, but really get a book, a listing of best practice to know that we're following. So you just said
She teed me up.
what did you say?
I said it's like you teed me up. Go, keep going.
What you said was we already have systems in place. What's that system like? That.
So, do you want me to give
Yeah.
you? Okay. So the
Whoa, time out. So I think you offered when you started this that you would spearhead this, right?
Okay.
You said, right? You said, I'll take the lead on this.
Speaking of.
Speaking of.
What it was about, but
you always
sure.
have the lead on that. Okay.
I'll take the lead on whatever people tell me.
I don't.
Well,
I can own that one.
I'm just wondering if it's something that we can put on our next agenda.
I would love to work with Ezekiel on this.
So let me just can I give where we're at on financial best practices?
Yes.
So folks know that we have a set of financial policies that have been adopted by the select board. Those are the financial policies that you see online under the select board policies and procedures. The town received grant funding to complete an update of financial best practices. That is currently sitting in draft form. The work by the consultant that was funded by the grant was completed with Heather Lemieux's departure. What needs to happen this year is that we get those financial policies passed through the finance committee and then ultimately the select board. But in general, they were really great roadmap for best practices that were created by the Division of Local Services. There are some things in them that I don't necessarily agree with how they have informed us how we should make decisions about our own spending of free cash. And I think that there's some things in there that are shalls that should be shoulds. That said, we have this tool that has been created for us and we are so close to the finish line that there's just such good stuff in there that once we get that adopted and implemented, I think I'll share that with everybody here, the draft of that, because I think it is quite informative. It's a thick sucker.
Will you be done by August?
We are not going to be done by August. This is on a goal or a track we have to complete it by the end of this fiscal year. But nonetheless, they're in draft form. They're still best practices that were designed by Division of Local Services.
So one thing with that in mind is that maybe I'll review some of those and I'll talk, Ezekiel and I can start with like the highest priority, because having these policies, implementing them is a whole other thing.
Correct.
So maybe Ezekiel and I can take the lead on creating the super priority, high priority best practice that we need to deploy more urgently, and we can bring that back to this committee.
I have two questions. Is the school committee going to fall under these best practices that we're going to put together, since they seem to be separate? That's one.
Some of them, yes.
And B, we have the financial doctor here that's coming in. Are you bringing in financial best practices with you that you've used in the past that have worked? Like, what's your plan?
I do have some. Unfortunately, we're operating without a business manager right now, and we had a business manager for 1 year, and it's kind of hard to do everything all at once, as well as educating the children in town. So right now, my priority for fiscal best management is to hire a competent and capable business manager.
And will you and that person work closely with city managers?
Yes, absolutely.
So Tim, I just want to add, as part of this category, I'd like to see more communication with the finance committee and the superintendent going into the spring in preparations for the school budget presentation. There's no surprises. The finance committee gets what they were looking for, and there's not multiple requests for meetings or questions that just come out of nowhere. That they have the format, that the finance committee has a format that they're looking for, and that the superintendent understands that format.
I think my goal would be to meet quarterly with the finance committee to have those types of conversations so that there aren't any surprises.
Thank you.
Chris,
That's
you
Chris.
and I, we're gonna hang out. It's gonna be great.
On Jen's text speed.
You can be on mine now too. The
Watch
office.
out, you went to an inferior undergrad.
Yeah. I do think a digestible budget that's a little bit easier than what we've been doing would be helpful. And I would love to see what Dr. Fortuna has seen in other towns, and even Jen, have you seen in other towns? I know that the finance committee needs specific information, and possibly the public needs different information as well, so that'll be a longer conversation, I think, with the school committee. But I agree with you, Chris. I think it's very confusing when the grant money isn't included, and, you know, a lot of the times when the numbers look like they're going up and down wildly, you know, in the percentage column. I think some of those can be explained through grant appropriations. Some can be explained through my understanding of, you know, teachers with different seniority moving around. So I think there's some things that are just inherently difficult to analyze the way we've been having it presented in the past, so.
You know, one simple way that I have suggested is you have one page similar to the town manager did with all your money in, even if they're grant. And then you have a one-pager budget that includes all your operations. Because one thing I have mentioned in the finance committee is, for example, we get money. That is, this money grows away. We, as a community, wanted to still fund it for schools. So, but we don't know their current cost. So, you know, one-pagers for both revenue and expenses. It's the simplest way. Thank you.
And also we're looking at a common template, right, for everyone to use.
Right, I was just gonna say that, Chris.
And I think that the school committee should adopt that same.
Yep.
But I do think the school committee needs to not think of themselves as one department, but they do gotta segregate themselves down into, they get it decomposed into the pieces, right? However that may have
And I think so we're gonna go back to using ClearGov, which is the software to get us out of Excel. Get that.
Oh my God.
Okay. People are still going to be probably building their own Excel sheets for themselves before they upload it into ClearGov, so that doesn't change. But that, and then we're just kind of learning that software now, but from what I understand, you can spit it out to do almost anything on the public facing once the data's in there.
So it'll be departmental wide, same template, same ask.
Everybody's putting it in the same system.
DPWs, everything.
Yeah. But I think if there's things that, like, you know, you said that you wanted to hear that wouldn't be plugged into this software, right? Like I heard you want to hear 3 to 5 year departmental growth. You want to see maybe 3 to 5 year history of trend. You want to see what is operating outside the operating budget, what is being funded with grants. That's still, I think we should kind of come up with what the format is that FinCom wants to see that information that's outside. You know, every department should be starting with, this is who we are, this is what we do, these are our goals for the upcoming fiscal year, these are the goals for the upcoming 3 fiscal years. Moving on, right?
Yeah,
Like,
and for schools, I mean, Michael Cassidy presented a pretty good budget over the years, I mean, format-wise. So I think once he left, and then we had the override, the last 2 years have just been a little chaotic. I get it, right? But
I'm not kidding, it has been super chaotic. Super chaotic. You are absolutely 100%.
The rainbow.
So Jen, it sounds like that you can present a lot of that material at that next meeting in August.
no, definitely not. So,
About the program and the things you're going to be.
no, that's going to be department facing. That's probably not until late fall. That kind of how that is coming out of the wash. We're into winter and early winter and late winter into January, February for how that's going to look working with FinCom. I think for August, we're really starting to hear from departments on what their numbers are looking like. You're getting into the meat of what the departments are predicting for knowns, unknowns, question marks.
But I think we can use this forum to continue to be on the same page, I think is what some of us are trying to say, right? That as the budget process moves forward and as we continue to work over the years together, some collaboration from this group is better than whatever has been happening some more close collaboration.
So, it's 9:30, and we've done a great job. We've got through the agenda. But there's a lot of great conversation. You're gonna do minutes of some sort, right?
Once the recording is up, we're gonna, one of our hired minute takers is going to be handling the minutes for us.
Okay.
Great.
And then the boards will have to modify them for your own purposes, so they'll be, you'll have to put in your beginning and ends and.
Okay, all right. And are you gonna propose an agenda for August?
So there's already the draft, does everybody have the draft agendas, the draft schedules?
I have the dates.
I've sent it out to I'll resend it.
Yeah.
Perfect.
I'll resend it. So we do have to talk about dates, I think.
Well, I think that, the dates were
Yeah, I
proposed.
thought the dates were, what do you mean?
Well, so we have what was in the draft agenda for the draft tri-board schedule for
Right.
dates, and I think that I saw some emails from somebody earlier today that they wanted to talk about different dates that are on this.
I just said I didn't know the dates, and then you
Okay.
sent out the agenda and I got the dates.
Okay, so you've got,
I'm good.
everybody's got the dates.
August
Yeah, I
26th.
thought I saw that.
Yeah,
It's
you've
basically
seen
the
this,
last
right?
Tuesday of the month when the select board is meeting.
Oh, is it? I don't think so.
Oh, yeah.
August
Okay,
26th.
you're right.
Schedule some of the third.
Okay. my mistake.
November's TBD.
All right, so the dates for the meetings are here, in the agendas that you got, right? Okay. And we're gonna meet it, and we're gonna meet at town
No,
hall.
now it's in here.
And we're going to have it live. We can talk to Joe about all of that, okay? So I want to get you out of here before 10, give you bonus points. So if you want to close your meeting, Chris, however
Sure,
you have to do that.
is there a motion to adjourn the select board?
So moved.
Second.
Any additional discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion passes unanimously, and the select board is adjourned at 9:32 p.m.
Excellent. Tony?
I'll make a motion to adjourn the school committee meeting. at
So moved.
9:32.
So moved.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Passes, we're done.
Great. Thanks, Chris.
Make a motion to.
I didn't second.
Finance committee. Second.
So moved?
Second, third, fourth.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Great. We are adjourned. We'll see you in August. Thanks all.